Yo, what's up everyone? It's Harryverse X, and today we're checking out, what if Doctor Strange and Scarlet, which found Harry at Godric's Hollow and Chaos magic fused with Elder Wand. Drop a like if you're hyped. Subscribe for daily content. Let's get this story started. Chapter 1, The night the stars cracked. The anomaly hit Strange like a fist to the chest. He'd been in the middle of a meditation cycle, seated cross-legged 3 feet above the floor of the sanctum's library, surrounded by 17 open texts that rotated slowly in the amber candlelight. The book stopped moving. The candles bent sideways, flames stretching toward the northwest like compass needles finding magnetic north. Then the feeling arrived, not pain exactly, but a wrongness so profound his entire nervous system registered it as an emergency. He was on his feet and through a portal in 11 seconds. Personal record. The portal opened onto the roof of a brownstone in Greenwich Village, cold October air snapping at his cloak of levitation, the red fabric already agitated and pulling northwest with something close to urgency. Strange looked at it for half a second, jaw tight. "Yeah," he said. "I feel it too." He didn't need the cloak to navigate. The eye of Agamotto was already warm against his sternum, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the distant wrongness, slow, arrhythmic, like a heartbeat skipping. He cast a detection working, watched the threads of dimensional energy fan out from his fingers in pale gold, and followed the line of greatest tension northwest across the Atlantic. He'd been tracking the anomaly for 40 seconds when the second portal opened 6 feet to his left, crackling with deep crimson energy that had nothing to do with his own sorcery. Wanda Maximoff stepped through it like she'd been walking through doors made of collapsing reality her entire life, which, to be fair, she basically had. She was in a dark jacket, hair loose, and her eyes were already active, the irises burning that particular shade of red that meant she wasn't looking at the physical world at all. She was reading the dimensional weave directly, which was a thing Strange had taken 3 years to learn and she'd apparently figured out sometime around Tuesday. "You feel that?" she said. "Obviously. England. West of London, rural. Maybe an hour old." She held up her hand and a thread of red chaos energy coiled around her fingers like a living thing, orienting. "It's not closing. Anomalies like this close in minutes. Hours at most." Strange was already running the numbers, pulling up everything the eye could show him. Whatever caused it, it wasn't just big. It was categorically unusual. The dimensional membrane didn't tear, it shuddered, Wanda said. She lowered her hand and looked at him, and there was something in her expression he recognized, the particular focus she got when something resonated with her on a frequency she didn't have words for yet. Like something fundamental was rewritten. That's a dramatic interpretation. That's what it felt like. He couldn't argue with it, because it was also what it felt like to him, and Strange trusted his instincts even when they produced conclusions he didn't like. He opened a portal, golden, geometric, slicing through the night air with clean precision, and stepped through. Wanda was 2 steps ahead of him on the other side. Godric's Hollow was quiet in the way that places are quiet after something terrible has just finished happening. Not peaceful. Still. The difference mattered. It was a small village, the kind that existed in that particular English way, old stone, narrow lanes, a church with a graveyard that predated the nation by centuries. Smoke drifted from chimneys. A cat sat on a garden wall and watched them arrive with the profound indifference of cats everywhere. Strange sealed the portal behind him and stood for a moment, reading the air. The dimensional disturbance was right here. Not just nearby, here, in this specific patch of village, concentrated around a lane of terraced houses 2 streets over from the church. He could feel the residue of it like static electricity pressed into the world's skin. Wanda was already moving, and he fell into step beside her without discussion. They'd worked together enough times that their operational rhythm was established without being formal. She watched the metaphysical layers. He tracked the structural and temporal dimensions. Between them, they generally got a complete picture faster than either could alone. The house, when they found it, stopped them both at the garden gate. The top floor was blown open. Not burned, not collapsed, opened, like something had detonated outward from a central point on the first floor and the building had simply surrendered to the physics of the event. Bricks were embedded in neighboring gardens. The roof had redistributed itself across a radius of about 30 meters. The walls that remained were scorched with two entirely distinct energy signatures that Strange could read as clearly as text. The first was dark magic, dense, cold, with that particular necrotic quality that he associated with the worst traditions of British wizardry. A killing curse, but one that had done something the killing curse was not supposed to do. It had redirected. He could see the trajectory in the scorch patterns, the way the magical residue curved in a parabolic arc rather than terminating at a target. Something had caught it and thrown it back. The second signature was the anomaly. It was red. Not the red of flames or the red of blood, a deep, foundational red, the color of things that existed before color was invented. It had saturated the entire structure, permeated the stone and wood and plaster, and it was still active. Not diminishing. Breathing. Chaos magic, Wanda said, very quietly. You recognize it. It's mine. She moved through the ruined gate, stepping over a chunk of masonry, her eyes wide and bright. Or, not mine, but the same kind. Same source. Same. She pressed her fingers against a section of standing wall and Strange watched the red energy in the stone respond to her touch, reaching toward her like it recognized her. The same song, she finished, which was not a precise diagnostic term but was, he suspected, more accurate than anything he could have said. Strange followed her inside. The ground floor was mostly intact, which seemed improbable given the state of the upper story. The sitting room had the desolate, suspended quality of places where violence had recently occurred, a teacup still sitting on the side table, a child's toy on the floor, a photograph on the mantel of a smiling couple with an infant, the photograph no longer moving in the way that enchanted photographs apparently did. As if the magic that animated it had simply given up. He looked at the photograph for a moment. Young woman with dark red hair and green eyes that laughed even in still images. Young man with glasses and hair that looked like it had never once obeyed gravity. Infant, mid-laugh, arms reaching for something out of frame. He moved to the stairs. The second floor was where it had happened. He could read it in perfect, terrible clarity, the crib, the scorch marks, the precise center point of the dimensional eruption. A woman lay on the floor beside the crib, and Strange moved to her immediately, already knowing, checking anyway because you always checked. Lily Potter, according to the letter that lay open on the nearby writing desk, its envelope addressed in a hurried hand. She had been dead for approximately 90 minutes. The killing curse left a signature he'd learned to identify over years of dealing with dark magical situations, and it was present here with devastating clarity. She had not died defending herself. She had died defending the crib. The crib was empty. He was turning to look for the child, calculating, already concerned that a 1-year-old could have crawled away into the rubble and that every second mattered, when Wanda made a sound from across the room. Not a word. Not an alarm. Just a soft, involuntary exhalation, the kind of sound you make when something hits you somewhere beneath language. Harry Potter was in the corner of the destroyed room, seated upright in a patch of debris with the calm that infants occasionally achieve, not contentment exactly, but a kind of profound present-tense absorption. He was perhaps 12 or 13 months old. Dark hair. Lily Potter's eyes. A wound on his forehead in the precise shape of a lightning bolt, still fresh, surrounded by what Strange immediately identified as an interaction scar, the kind of mark left when two powerful, incompatible magical forces collide and the physical matter between them bears the evidence. He was not crying. He was not distressed in any observable way. He was watching the red energy that drifted through the room, the chaos magic residue, with the focused attention of a person observing something beautiful, and occasionally, when a tendril of it drifted near his small hands, it curved toward him. Responding. He's the source, Strange said. I know. Wanda had crossed the room without him noticing, which happens sometimes. She was crouched 3 feet from the child, at his eye level, watching him with an expression Strange recognized and felt the familiar, careful concern about, the particular quality of Wanda's attention when something resonated with her grief. Stephen. It came from him. The anomaly, the dimensional surge, the chaos energy in the walls. It all came from him. A 1-year-old produced a Class 7 dimensional event. He didn't produce it, Wanda said. He survived something, and surviving it became a Class 7 dimensional event. That's different. She extended one hand, very slowly, palm up, toward the child. The boy looked at her hand. Then he looked at her face. Then he placed his own small hand in her palm with the decisive, unsentimental trust that very small children extend to the universe before the universe teaches them better. The chaos energy in the room pulsed once, warm and deep, and then subsided into the background like a held breath released. He's extraordinary, Wanda said. Her voice was level but her jaw was tight in the way it got when she was fighting something. You understand that, right? This isn't a magical child who had an unusual night. This is something that shouldn't be possible. Most things that matter shouldn't be, Strange said, which was his honest philosophy and also a slight deflection because he needed a moment to think. He was thinking very quickly, because the situation demanded it and because his mind operated best under that kind of pressure. The facts arranged themselves with clinical efficiency: 1 dead parent, 1 absent parent, James Potter. He'd skimmed the letter, there was a war on, the father was presumably also dead or would be shortly, 1 surviving infant who had just produced a magical event that had no clean precedent in any of the 1700 texts he had memorized, and who was currently holding Wanda Maximoff's hand and watching her with a gaze that was far too steady for a child his age. He needs medical attention, Strange said, beginning with the immediate. The wound on his forehead is stable. Wanda's free hand gestured, and a thread of red light ran gently across the scar without touching it, reading it. Whatever made this also sealed it. The magic in the wound is contained. Compressed. It's not bleeding into his system, it's... She paused, head tilting. It's stored. Like it's waiting. That's not reassuring. No, she agreed. But it's stable. Strange moved to the ruined window and looked out at the lane below, where lights were beginning to flicker on in neighboring houses. He could detect, now that he was paying attention, the edges of a concealment working, a Fidelius charm, partially dissolved, the kind of layered magical protection that British wizards built around sensitive locations. The protective layers were collapsing in real time, which meant that within hours, possibly sooner, this location would be visible and accessible to whatever authorities existed in the wizarding world. That thought landed in a specific way. There will be people coming, he said. His people. Wizards. He turned back into the room. Someone will have felt the magical surge. Someone will come to investigate and to find him. I know. We should leave before, I know, Stephen. Wanda looked at the boy. The boy was still watching her face with those green eyes that were his mother's eyes and that looked up at Wanda Maximoff with the zero hesitation trust of the very young and the magically aware. But we need to decide something first. The silence was about 4 seconds long, which was enough time for Strange to fully run the implications of what she wasn't saying and arrive at the conclusion that she had already arrived at. Wanda. He has chaos magic in him. Fused with whatever native wizardry he was born with. I have never seen that before. In anything, in any timeline, in any world. Her voice was careful and precise, which meant she was feeling something large and was packaging it rigorously. If someone takes him and raises him and doesn't understand what he is, they will suppress it. Or they'll try to use it. Or both, in sequence. Or they'll raise him as a normal wizarding child and the chaos energy will integrate on its own and everything will be fine, Strange said, because he was constitutionally obligated to present the optimistic scenario even when he personally assigned it low probability. With a Class 7 dimensional anomaly's worth of chaos magic fused into his native power, Wanda said flatly. You think that integrates on its own? No, he admitted. I think it eats the people around him and then him, eventually, if it isn't properly understood and guided. I can understand it, she said. Guide it. I've been managing an internal chaos energy source since I was 10 years old. I know exactly what this is. I know you do. Then what are we actually debating, Stephen? He looked at her. He looked at the boy, Harry, the letter had said, Harry Potter, who had, in the last 2 minutes, fallen asleep in Wanda's hand with the complete structural commitment to unconsciousness that only infants and the extremely exhausted can achieve. A bruise on his forehead from the debris, the lightning bolt wound clean and strange above it, his chest rising and falling with the uncomplicated certainty of a person who has decided the immediate situation is safe. We're debating, Strange said slowly, whether two people who regularly operate in active combat situations, who travel between dimensions and through time, who have individually been dead at least once, twice, Wanda said, are appropriate guardians for an infant. We're debating that. She nodded seriously. Okay. A beat. We're terrible candidates, he said. The worst, she agreed. The sanctum is not child-safe. I will make it child-safe. We know nothing about wizarding culture or how to raise a child within it. We know everything about magic. Everything else is learnable. He looked at the window again, where the first gray suggestion of pre-dawn was beginning to dilute the black, and where the distant sounds of the village starting to rouse themselves suggested time was contracting. There will be people who want him. Specifically. People who had plans for him. Yes, Wanda said. That's exactly why. Strange was quiet for a long moment, standing in the ruins of Lily Potter's house, surrounded by the residue of a magical catastrophe and the evidence of a love powerful enough to bend the fundamental rules of how magic operated. The eye of Agamotto pulsed steadily against his chest. The cloak drifted in no wind. He thought about the photograph on the mantel downstairs. He thought about the woman on the floor who had died in this room so that her son wouldn't. He thought about the fact that if he calculated forward through the most probable timeline variance, and he'd spent enough time working with the time stone to know how to read probability cascades, a child left here tonight, in this world, with the kind of power currently sleeping in Wanda's hands, had outcomes that ranged from tragic to catastrophic depending on whose hands he fell into next. He thought about what it meant to be raised to be used. We take him, Strange said. Wanda smiled, not widely, not sentimentally, but the small, certain smile of someone who already knew what the answer was going to be and had simply been waiting for the math to catch up. We take him, she agreed. She stood carefully, cradling the child against her shoulder in a way that Strange noted, without comment, looked perfectly natural. Practiced almost, though he knew it wasn't. The chaos energy in the room gave one last soft pulse as she moved, like a house sighing as the door closes, and then it was still. Strange cast one final working over the room, a temporal record seal, pulling the energetic imprint of what had happened here into a compressed memory he could study later, storing it in the eye where it would be safe. He looked at Lily Potter for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. I'm sorry, he said, which was not a habit of his, but felt right. Then he turned, and opened a portal back to New York, and walked through it behind Wanda Maximoff and the sleeping boy who would change everything. The Sanctum Sanctorum at 3 a.m. was its own particular kind of alive. The building creaked and shifted in the way old magical structures did, responding to the energy of its inhabitants, aware in the dim and imprecise way of ancient places. Strange landed in the main hall and let the portal close behind him, and the house felt the change immediately. Something in the walls, the deep, old sorcery of the building, reached toward the child Wanda carried, cautious and then curious, like an animal investigating something unfamiliar. Wong appeared at the top of the stairs in approximately 45 seconds, which was a testament to either his awareness or his insomnia. He was in a bathrobe. He was carrying a book. He looked down at them, and his expression moved through several rapid transitions, confused, alarmed, and then settling on the specific brand of resigned disbelief he developed for situations involving strange and unexpected escalations. Is that a baby? Wong said. Yes, said Strange. Whose baby? His name is Harry, Wanda said, from where she'd settled into the large chair by the fireplace, adjusting the sleeping child against her with the particular care of someone handling something irreplaceable. Wong descended the stairs one step. Stopped. Strange. It's a long explanation. Is it a good explanation? It's an accurate one. Wong looked at Harry. Harry was deeply asleep, small and dark-haired and wearing, Strange now noticed, a small knitted sweater with a snitch embroidered on the front that Lily Potter had presumably put on him that morning with no knowledge of what the night would bring. The lightning bolt wound on his forehead had faded to a pink mark, barely visible, but Wong's eyes found it immediately. What is that on his forehead? Wong said, and his voice had changed slightly, the way voices did when something moved from the category of unexpected to the category of significant. That, Strange said, hanging his cloak on the rack by the door, the cloak immediately flew back and drifted in the direction of Harry, hovering 6 inches above the child with what Strange could only describe as attentiveness, is what we need to talk about. They talked until the sun came up. Strange laid out everything methodically, the anomaly, the house, the 2 magical signatures, the nature of the scar and what Wanda had detected in it. Wanda added the chaos magic analysis, which became a 30-minute detour when Wong started asking precise technical questions that required precise technical answers. Between them, the picture that emerged was comprehensive and deeply unusual. Harry Potter was, by birth, a trained magical bloodline, the son of 2 of Britain's most powerful wizards, which meant he had an innate magical capacity that would have been significant regardless of anything else. But the night's events had done something that had no documented precedent, a killing curse, one of the darkest and most absolute workings in the British magical tradition, had struck a target protected by a love so powerful it had taken on the properties of an active magical working. The curse had not dissipated. It had not been blocked. It had been rejected, hurled back at its caster with the full force of its own intent, and in that moment of rejection, something in Harry Potter's innate magical structure had fractured open. And chaos energy had poured in. The energy was ambient, Wanda said, frowning at the fire. It was already there. In the world, diffuse, unstructured. The fracture in his magical core was like an open window in a pressure differential. It rushed in and fused because the conditions were perfect. His core was open, the love working was still active and provided a kind of scaffolding, and the chaos energy had somewhere to go. So he's both, Wong said. He's both. Native British magical ability, wizard, in their parlance, plus a chaos magic core that's fused directly into his baseline magical structure. Not layered on top. Not separate. Fused. They're the same thing now. Can you unfuse them? Wong asked, very practically. No, said Wanda, in a tone that made it clear the question was not worth discussing further. Strange had been quiet for several minutes, which Wong recognized as the precursor to a decision. The scar functions as a containment system, he said, finally. Whatever piece of the killing curse's caster survived the rebound, and given the energy patterns I read at the scene, something did, it stored in the scar. Separated from Harry's own magic by the chaos energy acting as a barrier. He looked at Wanda. That's what you meant when you said waiting. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Something else is in him. Something foreign. The chaos magic is keeping it contained, but it's there. Can we remove it? Wong said. Not without understanding it completely first, Strange said. Attempting to remove it without full knowledge of the mechanism could damage his core, damage the chaos magic integration, or release whatever is being contained directly into his system. So we learn, Wanda said simply. We take the time we need, and we learn. She looked down at Harry, who had not stirred through any of this, who slept with the absolute authority of someone who had decided this situation was resolved. He needs time anyway. He's 1 year old. He needs a room, Wong said, standing and pulling his robe tighter with the manner of someone who has accepted the situation and is moving to logistics. The East Wing has that room by the library, the one with the view of the street. Good natural light. Structurally stable. Structurally stable, Strange repeated. Thank you, Wong, for that baseline. With a magically active infant who has a chaos core, structurally stable is the floor requirement, not the ceiling. He moved toward the stairs. I'll see to it. When he was gone, Strange stood and moved to the fireplace, looking into the coals. Wanda was quiet behind him. The cloak had settled itself over the arm of her chair, one corner resting against the child like a very flat, very strange blanket. He's going to be something entirely new, Strange said. Yes, Wanda said. The wizarding world will come for him eventually. They have a prophecy, or the beginning of one. I could read the edges of it in the energy patterns at the house. Something about a dark lord and the one with power to vanquish him. He's the intended piece in someone's game. He's not a piece, Wanda said, and her voice was quiet but had the particular quality of a door being definitively closed. No, Strange agreed. He's not. He turned to look at her, and at the child, and at the cloak of levitation making its own unilateral decisions about caregiving. He's ours. Wanda looked up at him, and the fire caught in her eyes, and the red that was always moving at the edges of her power was warm and steady. He's ours, she said. Outside, the sun was fully up now, burning cold and gold through the sanctum's high windows, filling the hallway with ordinary morning light that fell on extraordinary things without distinguishing between them. Somewhere above them, Wong was apparently dismantling a storage room with more efficiency than the situation technically required. The building creaked and settled around its new inhabitant, and in the walls, where the old magic lived, something shifted, recognized, and held. Harry Potter slept through all of it. His hand was curled loosely at his cheek, tiny fingers half closed, and above the bridge of his nose the lightning bolt mark pulsed once, slowly, with a light that was partly gold and partly that deep foundational red, and then went still. Waiting, like Wanda had said. But not yet. Chapter 2, The Boy in the Sanctum. The first thing Harry broke was a mirror. He was 2.5, which meant he had been walking for approximately 8 months and running for approximately 6, and the Sanctum Sanctorum had still not fully adjusted to the operational reality of a small person who moved at unpredictable speeds in unpredictable directions. Strange had reinforced the library shelves. Wong had moved anything fragile above the 4-foot line. Wanda had installed a soft working on every sharp corner in the east wing that caused them to round themselves whenever Harry was within arm's reach, which the building accepted with the flexible dignity of a structure that had seen stranger modifications. None of this had accounted for the mirror in the third-floor corridor. It was an old mirror, tall and bronze-framed, one of 17 that the Sanctum maintained as dimensional monitoring tools, passive instruments that reflected not just physical space but the metaphysical texture of the room, useful for detecting intrusions or disturbances. Strange had walked past it every day for 9 years without incident. Harry had walked past it once, stopped, looked at his reflection with the focused intensity he brought to anything that caught his attention, and then apparently decided something about it was wrong and needed correcting. The chaos magic moved before he did, a quiet pulse of deep red that traveled from his hand into the mirror's surface, and then the mirror, gently and completely, unmade itself. Not shattered. Not cracked. It simply ceased to be a mirror and became instead a bronze frame surrounding 32 square feet of open air, through which the corridor on the other side was perfectly, ordinarily visible. Strange had been 6 feet away. He stood very still for a moment, looking at the frame where the mirror had been. Then he looked at Harry, who looked back at him with Lily Potter's green eyes and an expression that was already, at 2.5, developing the quality of careful assessment. Didn't like it, Harry said, which was a complete sentence by his standards at the time. I noticed, Strange said. It felt wrong. Strange crouched to his eye level, a habit he'd developed without fully noticing, getting down to Harry's height when they talked, which Wanda had observed with quiet satisfaction. Wrong how? Harry considered the question with more seriousness than most adults brought to casual conversation. Like it was looking back, he said finally. Things that look back should ask first. Strange was quiet for a moment. The frame sat in the wall behind Harry, perfectly intact, the mirror simply gone. 32 square feet of nothing where a dimensional monitoring tool had been for the better part of a century. That's actually a reasonable position, Strange said. He spent the afternoon re-examining every mirror in the sanctum. 2 of them, on close inspection, were doing things he hadn't noticed before. He removed them himself. Harry never mentioned the mirror again. But from that point forward, Strange began paying different attention to what the boy noticed, and why, and what he did about it. The education was not planned, exactly. It emerged. Wanda started it first, because Wanda's relationship with Harry was immediate and instinctive in a way that didn't need a curriculum. She simply included him. When she practiced, he watched. When he watched, he asked questions, and she answered them with the directness she applied to everything. When his hand started producing small red sparks during her explanations, which happened for the first time when he was 3, during a discussion about the nature of chaos energy that was probably technically above his comprehension level but which he had insisted on attending, she didn't make a thing of it. She just adjusted her hands to mirror his and showed him what to do next. Feel where it comes from, she told him, sitting cross-legged on the library floor while 3-year-old Harry sat across from her with his hands raised and red light threading between his fingers like something breathing. Not your hands. Deeper. My chest, he said immediately. Yes. What does it feel like? He thought about it. Like a door, he said. But it's also the thing behind the door. Wanda looked at him for a moment with an expression Strange, watching from the doorway, couldn't entirely read. That's exactly right, she said. That's exactly what it is. She leaned forward and placed 2 fingers lightly against his sternum, and her own chaos energy reached out and touched his with a precision Strange associated with her most careful work. Harry's eyes went very wide, and for just a second the red light between his fingers doubled, rich and warm and deep, and then settled back to its baseline as he exhaled. There you go, Wanda said softly. Now you know where it lives. Strange taught him differently. He taught him structure, because structure was what he knew and what he trusted, and because, more importantly, Harry's power needed architecture or it would build its own, and the architecture a chaos-infused magical child built unsupervised was unlikely to be anything Strange wanted to live with. He started with perception. The ability to read magical structures, to see the weave of workings the way a musician hears the components of a chord. Harry took to this with disturbing speed. By age 4 he could walk through the sanctum and narrate every active working in every room with an accuracy that made Wong stop mid-sentence and write things down. There's something in the walls on the 2nd floor, Harry told Strange one afternoon, standing in the corridor outside the reading room, head slightly tilted in the way he had when he was listening to something most people couldn't hear. Something old. It's not a working. It's more like a memory. The building remembers things, Strange said. Ancient structures do. The magic saturates the material over decades, centuries. Impressions accumulate. Harry pressed his palm flat against the wall. It remembers someone who was very sad here, he said. A long time ago. And then not sad. That's the part it kept. Strange looked at the wall, and then at Harry, and said nothing for a moment. Can you tell the difference between a memory and an active working? Yes, Harry said, in a tone that suggested this was obvious. Memories are still. Workings are breathing. Most trained sorcerers can't reliably make that distinction for 10 years of study, Strange told him, very calmly, because he had learned not to make a large thing of Harry's more remarkable moments or Harry would get self-conscious about them. Good. Now tell me about the reading room. Harry told him about the reading room for 40 minutes. Strange spent the following evening cross-referencing everything Harry had described against his own detailed knowledge of the sanctum's magical architecture, and found 3 things he'd missed. He didn't tell Harry this. He did, however, adjust the curriculum. Wong was, in many ways, Harry's most unconventional teacher, and also in some ways the most important one. Wong taught him to read. Not just English, 5 languages by age 6, because Wong's philosophy of education was comprehensive and slightly ruthless, and he saw absolutely no reason to limit scope based on what was age-appropriate when the person in question was picking up Mandarin faster than Wong had at 12. He taught him history, real history, which included the history of magic and the history of every human civilization that had ever built something remarkable or destroyed something that deserved to survive. He also, critically, taught Harry how to lose at chess. Not how to lose. Harry was a genuinely good chess player, which seemed to be innate, because Strange couldn't play at all and Wanda treated chess as an obstacle to real conversation. But Wong taught him to lose without it meaning anything about his ability, which was a specific lesson with a specific purpose. "You made a mistake," Wong would say, when a game went against Harry. "I know," Harry would say, studying the board. "Are you upset?" "I'm thinking about what I should have done." "That's the right response," Wong said. Being upset would make it harder to think. But not thinking about it would mean you don't learn. The middle path between caring and spiraling, that's where your mind should live. Harry nodded seriously. He was 5. He beat Wong at chess 4 months later and was almost embarrassingly gracious about it, which Wong considered a complete educational success. The Cloak of Levitation, meanwhile, had developed a relationship with Harry that operated entirely outside any pedagogical framework. It had taken to following him through the sanctum with the faithful, faintly ridiculous dedication of a large pet, and Harry had accepted this with the same unsentimental pragmatism he applied to most things. By the time he was 4, he'd started talking to it, not in a childish anthropomorphizing way but in a conversational way, as if he'd established that the cloak had opinions and was simply consulting them. "He tells it things," Strange said to Wanda one evening, watching from the landing as Harry sat in the library below, explaining something to the cloak with apparent seriousness while it draped over the chair beside him in an attitude of attentive listening. "Like a friend." "It is his friend," Wanda said simply. "It chose him. Magical objects sometimes do. It's my cloak." "It was your cloak." She sipped her tea. "Now it's complicated." Strange looked back down at Harry, who was apparently telling the cloak about something he'd read about dimensional convergence zones, small hands gesturing in the particular pattern he'd started using when he was illustrating spatial concepts, a habit inherited from watching Strange work, recognizable in the wrist movement, alien in the red light that occasionally threaded through it. "I'm not complaining," Strange said, after a moment. "Just observing." "You're fond of him," Wanda said. "I'm responsible for him." "Stephen." He looked at her. "You're fond of him," she said again, with the patience of someone who was prepared to repeat the statement as many times as necessary. "Yes," Strange said, because there was no point arguing with things that were true. "I'm extremely fond of him. It's wildly inconvenient." The first time Harry's magic went fully uncontrolled, he was 6 years old, and it was Strange's fault. Not in the way that implied negligence, in the way that implied he had underestimated something, which was a different category of error and one Strange took more seriously because it was rarer. He'd been running Harry through a basic dimensional perception exercise, the kind of structured work they did every few weeks to monitor how his powers were developing. Standard practice was to open a small perceptual window into an adjacent dimensional space, have Harry describe what he saw, and close it again in under 2 minutes. What Strange had not accounted for was that the adjacent dimensional space he'd chosen, for no particular reason except convenience, had a recent and significant emotional residue. The dark dimension bled at the edges sometimes, its emotional static seeping into adjacent spaces, and that particular afternoon one of those edges was closer than his reading had indicated. Harry put his hand through the perceptual window, which he wasn't supposed to do and which Strange started to correct, and then Harry went completely still. The red came out of him all at once. Not controlled, not precise, it erupted from every point of his body simultaneously, flooding the room with a wave of chaos energy so concentrated that Strange's protective workings activated automatically, and every piece of furniture in the room moved 3 feet to the left in perfect unison, and 2 of the windows reformed themselves into shapes that were not rectangles, And the dimensional window Strange had opened tore from a 4-inch circle to a 4-foot tear in the space of a second. Strange had his hands up and was already working a containment, fast, 3-layered, building the walls of it outward from Harry's position while simultaneously reinforcing the edges of the dimensional tear to prevent it from propagating. His mind was running the triage calculation: seal the tear first, contain Harry second, but Harry was the source of the energy feeding the tear, so actually seal both simultaneously, which required splitting his focus in a way that was technically not possible but which he did anyway because the alternative was worse. "Harry," he said, and kept his voice absolutely level. "Look at me." Harry's eyes were open and were entirely red, which was information Strange filed away for later and did not visibly react to. The chaos energy was building in visible waves, each pulse extending the tear another few inches, the emotional residue from the dark dimension's edge bleeding through it and feeding whatever Harry was feeling. "Harry." Strange stepped forward into the chaos energy, which pushed against him like walking into a river, and put his hands on Harry's shoulders. The energy hit his palms and he held it, not suppressing it, because suppressing chaos magic was like holding a fire by squeezing it, it just burned elsewhere, but redirecting, giving it a path that wasn't the dimensional tear, that wasn't outward in all directions. "Stephen." Harry's voice was small and very frightened, which was new, because Harry almost never sounded frightened. "I've got you," Strange said. "I can't, you don't have to stop it. Just let it go somewhere that isn't out." He moved his hands from Harry's shoulders to his hands, which were shaking, and held them. The chaos energy poured into him and he managed it with the attention of a man who had once held the time stone during a collapsing dimensional incursion and simply decided that was not the day. "There's no emergency. You're safe. The room is fine." Two of those things were currently slightly inaccurate but would become accurate once Harry's attention was no longer amplifying the situation. "Something was in there," Harry said. "In the window. Something that felt, I know. I felt it too. I should not have opened a window in that direction today. That was my mistake." Strange said this clearly and without qualification, because he'd decided early on that taking clean responsibility for his own errors in front of Harry was non-negotiable. The residue from that space carries emotional weight. Your magic reacted to it. That's not a failure, that's your power being responsive. We're going to learn how to respond to it differently. The chaos energy was slowing. Still moving, but the uncontrolled eruption quality was fading, and Harry's eyes were cycling back, red receding, green returning, the specific shade of his mother's eyes emerging like something surfacing from deep water. The dimensional tear had stopped propagating, held by Strange's working, and was already beginning to close naturally as the energy source decreased. "The furniture," Harry said, looking around. "I'll sort it. The windows. Also sortable." Strange looked at the two windows, which had reformed themselves into shapes that were, he had to admit, aesthetically interesting if not architecturally standard. "Eventually." Harry let out a breath that was shaky at the edges, and Strange felt the last of the uncontrolled energy discharge through their joined hands and dissipate. The room was quiet. Slightly rearranged. Both windows were now rhombus-shaped. But quiet. "I didn't mean to," Harry said. "I know. I couldn't, Harry." Strange looked at him directly. "You are 6 years old, you have a magical structure that has no precedent in any tradition I know, and you maintained enough awareness during that to hear me when I spoke and to redirect rather than continue escalating. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, remarkable." He released Harry's hands and sat back on his heels. "We'll work on the specific triggers. But don't confuse losing control once with not having it." Harry was quiet, thinking about this with the methodical seriousness that Strange recognized as his default setting for anything that mattered. "What was in the window?" he asked. It felt like something very sad that had decided to be angry instead. Strange looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "That's a very accurate description of the dark dimension." "Is it a person?" "It's more of a condition," Strange said. We'll talk about it properly when you're older. You say that about a lot of things. And I always follow through. Harry accepted this with the patience of someone who had learned that Strange kept his word. He stood, brushing dust off his knees, the furniture rearrangement had displaced some dust, and looked around the room with the assessment expression. The windows are going to bother Wong, he said. The windows are going to bother me, Strange said. Wong will just look at them and say something cutting about my spatial precision. Harry smiled, small and real, and the last of the tension went out of his shoulders. I'll tell him it was artistic, he said. Please don't help. Wanda found out about the incident the way she found out about most things, which was immediately, because the sanctum's ambient magical sensitivity was calibrated to her awareness, and a chaos energy eruption of that magnitude was the equivalent of setting off a flare. She arrived in the doorway of the practice room while Strange was in the process of returning the furniture to its original positions, and Harry was attempting, with moderate success, to encourage the windows back toward rectangular. She took in the room, the windows, Strange's expression, Harry's slightly disheveled state, and the residual shimmer of chaos energy that still clung to the walls like smoke from a recently extinguished fire. How big, she said. Manageable, Strange said. I'm asking Harry. Harry turned from the window, and the look he exchanged with Wanda was the particular look they had, direct, honest, the unspoken agreement that she got the real answer and then they dealt with it together. Big, he said. Everything went sideways at once. I couldn't separate which part of me to pull back. Wanda crossed the room and crouched in front of him, same as she always did, eye level. She pressed 2 fingers to his sternum, gentle, reading. Harry held still. The chaos energy in him was settled now, quiet, back in its normal resting state, but she read all of it, the quality of the eruption, the emotional trigger, the pattern of the escalation. The dark dimension residue hit the part of you that your mother's magic is stored in, she said, and said it plainly, because she had learned that Harry's grief and Harry's power were connected in ways that required honesty rather than protection. Her sacrifice is in your magical core. The love working that redirected the killing curse, it's in there, it's part of you. When something that felt like profound loss touched that spot, your power responded. Harry was very still. Is that going to keep happening? Until you learn to be with it instead of away from it, Wanda said. The response is correct. The magnitude is the thing we work on. She lowered her hand. Your power is not a malfunction, Harry. It responds to things that matter. That's what it's supposed to do. Losing control of it doesn't feel like it's supposed to happen, he said. No, she agreed. It doesn't. But the losing control is how it teaches you where the edges are. She tilted her head, and something moved in her expression, briefly. I didn't have anyone to help me learn that. So things went badly in ways they didn't need to. You have us. That's different. Harry looked at her for a moment, then nodded once, with the finality of someone who has decided to accept an argument rather than continue contesting it. Can we do it again, he said. The exercise. With the window. I want to try it correctly. Strange, behind him, stopped pretending to focus on the furniture. Tomorrow, Wanda said. Tonight, Harry said. Wanda looked over Harry's head at Strange. Strange looked back at her. Tonight, Strange said. But we use the east window and we do it in stages. Harry was already moving toward the practice position, organized and present and committed, and the red light around his hands was quiet and steady as breathing. Whatever had shaken through him 20 minutes earlier had been processed and filed and converted to information. The cloak, which had appeared silently in the doorway at some point during the conversation, drifted in and settled at his shoulders without being asked. He looked, Strange thought, not for the first time, not for the last, like something that was being built on purpose by forces that knew what they were doing, even when he didn't. A structure finding its own shape. The first contact from the wizarding world came when Harry was 7. It arrived as a letter, actual parchment, actual wax seal, actual owl, which managed to find the sanctum despite every concealment working Strange had layered on the building, which was itself diagnostic information. British Wizarding Post apparently operated on a magical address system that bypassed conventional concealment. He filed that away. The letter was from a Minerva McGonagall, deputy headmistress of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and it was written in the tone of someone who was certain they already knew where a thing was and simply needed to formally establish contact. The phrasing was careful, professional, and underneath the careful professionalism was the unmistakable quality of an institution that was not accustomed to being uncertain about the location of the children it had a claim on. "We have been monitoring Mr. Potter's magical signature," the letter said, in the third paragraph, in a sentence that was phrased as procedural fact and was actually quite extraordinary if you examined it closely. Strange examined it closely. He wrote back a polite reply establishing that Harry Potter was safe, healthy, and under appropriate guardianship, and that the matter of his education would be addressed at the appropriate time. He did not specify what he meant by appropriate time. He did not sign his full name. He sealed the letter with a working that would carry a mild but unmistakable sense of "don't push this" to anyone who opened it. The Owl, when it came back with a response 4 days later, carried a letter from Albus Dumbledore. Strange read that one more carefully. Then he handed it to Wanda without comment. She read it. The letter was long, gracious, and expressed with the elegant persuasiveness of a man who had spent a century being exactly as convincing as he needed to be. It conveyed deep care for Harry's well-being. It conveyed extensive knowledge of his history and circumstances. It conveyed, with particular artfulness, the suggestion that Harry's destiny within the wizarding world was something that could not be indefinitely deferred, and that the people who loved him would want to ensure he was properly prepared for it. The word destiny appeared 3 times. "No," Wanda said, and handed the letter back. Strange wrote a response. It was shorter than Dumbledore's letter, significantly less elegant, and said in precise and unmistakable terms that Harry's education was proceeding excellently, that his guardians were aware of his circumstances and had been from the first night, and that any further discussion of destiny could wait until Harry was old enough to participate in the discussion himself. He signed that one with his full name and title. The letters stopped for 2 years, which Strange estimated was Dumbledore deciding to take a longer view. He used those 2 years efficiently. Harry was 9 when Strange considered him ready to begin real sorcery training. Not the foundational work they'd been doing for years, the perception exercises, the energy management, the theoretical framework, but actual operative sorcery. The construction and execution of proper workings. Dimensional manipulation. The precise, technical discipline that Strange had spent a decade mastering. Harry took to it in the way that was, by now, entirely predictable and still somehow startling each time, with immediate intuitive competence that then drove itself toward mastery with focused and slightly ferocious determination. He was a natural, but naturals who don't work become ceilings. Harry worked. The combination of native wizarding magic, chaos energy foundation, and growing sorceress framework produced effects that Strange had never seen and couldn't entirely predict, which he found, against his better judgment, genuinely delightful. When Harry constructed a standard dimensional anchor, a basic first-year working in sorceress practice, it held not only in 3 spatial dimensions but seemed to extend into at least 1 metaphysical dimension as well, anchored in a substrate that Strange couldn't fully identify. When Harry cast a perception working, it read not just the physical and metaphysical layers but what could only be described as the emotional topology of a space, the accumulated feeling of a place, readable as clearly as its temperature. That shouldn't be possible, Strange said, the first time Harry described the emotional topology of the Sanctum's main hall with a specificity that included events from 30 years before either of them had been in it. But it is, Harry said, with the equanimity of someone for whom this was simply Tuesday. Yes, Strange said, and made a note. It is. Wong, observing the training session from the balcony above, said nothing. But later that evening, when Strange was alone in the library, he appeared with 2 cups of tea and a look that Strange recognized as the precursor to a serious observation. "He's going to exceed you," Wong said. Strange wrapped his hands around the tea. "Yes. You knew that already. I calculated the probability when he was 4. He sipped the tea. The chaos magic alone would have done it eventually. Combined with the native wizarding ability and the sorceress framework, the ceiling is, he paused. I can't actually see the ceiling. Does that bother you? Strange considered the question honestly. It would have, he said. 3 years ago. I would have found it uncomfortable. He looked at the fire. Now it seems like the right outcome for the right person. Wong nodded, and drank his tea, and didn't make anything more of it. Which was, Strange had always thought, one of Wong's more exceptional qualities. When the owl came for the 3rd time, not a wizarding post letter, but an actual encounter, a wizard appearing at the door of the sanctum with an official summons from something called the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Harry was 10 years old and sitting at the kitchen table working through a dimensional topology problem that Strange had assigned him 2 days ago. He heard the confrontation at the front door. He got up and stood at the kitchen doorway without being asked, listening, and Strange, opening the door to find a wizard in ministry robes who was clearly operating with the institutional confidence of someone who had never had a door opened by someone who didn't care about their institutional confidence, did not tell Harry to go back to his work. The ministry wizard, 40s, round face, the particular officious discomfort of a person who had been told a thing would be simple and is discovering it isn't, had a legal document and a prepared speech, both of which he got 2 sentences into before Strange's expression stopped him. Harry Potter, Strange said, without looking back, is a ward of this household and its guardians, who hold international magical authority that supersedes British domestic jurisdiction by about 6 centuries of precedent. The specific legal basis for that is documented in the archive of the Ancient One, which your ministry is welcome to petition to access, assuming they can find it. The petition process takes approximately 8 years. He paused. Was there anything else? The ministry wizard looked past Strange at Harry, who was standing in the kitchen doorway with an expression of calm and attentive interest. Harry raised one hand in a small wave. The red light moved quietly around his fingers, just visible, no more dramatic than it needed to be. The ministry wizard left. Harry went back to his topology problem without comment. But that evening, when Strange was in his study, Harry knocked and came in, which was their established protocol. Harry always knocked, Strange always answered, and stood in the doorway. They're going to keep coming, Harry said. Not upset, not worried. Observational. Yes, Strange said. Because of who I am, Harry said. What I am. The prophecy thing. Strange looked at him. He'd told Harry about the prophecy at age 8, because Harry had asked directly and because Strange didn't believe in managing information to protect people from their own circumstances. He'd told him about Voldemort at 8 as well, because the same principle applied. Harry had listened to all of it with the contained, analytical attention he brought to complex problems, asked several good questions, and gone away to think about it. Because of who you are, Strange confirmed. Yes. What do we do about it? We continue exactly as we've been doing, Strange said. You learn. You grow. When it becomes time to engage with the wizarding world, and it will, you do it on your terms, prepared, knowing what you are, with us behind you. Harry leaned against the doorframe. In the last year he'd gotten taller, the babyish quality of early childhood burning off to reveal the angular structure of his father's face and his mother's eyes and something else that was purely, specifically his, an alertness, a stillness, a quality of attention that Strange associated with people who had grown up in the presence of great power and learned to move carefully within it. Not cautiously. Carefully. The difference was precision. We'll go to Hogwarts, Harry said. When the time is right. And Dumbledore? Strange paused. Is a man who has been playing chess for a very long time, he said. He thinks he knows what piece you are. Harry thought about this. I'm not a piece, he said, and there was no heat in it, just a statement of fact, made with the same calm certainty with which he stated anything he knew to be true. No, Strange said. You're not. Harry nodded once, pushed himself off the doorframe, and went to bed. Strange turned back to his work. The fire burned quietly. Somewhere above, the cloak of levitation drifted past the study doorway on its evening circuit of the building, pausing at the threshold the way it had learned to when Strange was in here late, checking, in its particular way, that everything was as it should be. He thought about Dumbledore's letters, and the Ministry wizard's face, and the probability cascades he'd been running quietly in his mind for years. He thought about Harry standing in the kitchen doorway with that expression of calm interest and the red light moving softly around his fingers like something that had always known where it belonged. He thought about a woman with green eyes in a photograph that had stopped moving, and the choice that had been made in the ruins of her house, and how it had started as calculation and become, somewhere along the way and without his full noticing, something else entirely. He closed his books and went to check on Harry, which was not something he would have admitted was a habit if anyone had asked him about it directly. Harry was asleep. The cloak was already there. Chapter 3, The letter arrives, and so does everyone else. The Hogwarts letter came on a Tuesday. Harry was 11, eating toast at the kitchen table and reading a paper on dimensional fold mechanics that Strange had left for him with a note that said tell me what's wrong with the third proof in the margin, and the owl arrived the way owls always arrived at the sanctum, slightly confused, then suddenly and completely certain, the magical address system cutting through the concealment workings like a knife through water and depositing a tawny barn owl on the windowsill with the authority of something that had never once considered the possibility of failure. Harry looked at the owl. The owl looked at Harry. The letter attached to its leg was cream-colored parchment, sealed with a purple wax crest, a lion, a snake, an eagle, a badger arranged around a large letter H. He untied the letter with the practiced calm of someone who had been expecting this for approximately 4 years, read it front and back, set it down on the table next to the dimensional mechanics paper, and went back to the third proof. He was still there, toast finished and proof annotated, when Wanda came down 20 minutes later. She saw the letter, read his expression, picked it up without asking, and read it herself. "Well," she said. "I know. How do you feel?" Harry considered the question with the honesty he gave all of Wanda's direct questions. "Ready," he said. "And curious about what they'll make of me." "They won't know what to make of you," she said, pouring coffee with the ease of someone entirely comfortable with that fact. "That's the interesting part," Harry said. Strange appeared in the doorway in time to see Wanda hand him the letter, which he read in approximately 8 seconds and then set down with the particular stillness that meant he was running calculations. Harry watched him do it and waited, because Strange's calculations were always worth waiting for. "Dumbledore will have been notified the moment this letter generated," Strange said. "His name is on the second page. Headmaster, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore." He said the full name with the precision of someone filing it accurately. "He's been waiting for this for a decade." "So have we," Wanda said. "We've been preparing for it." "That's different from waiting for it." Strange picked up the letter again and looked at the supply list on the second page: robes, books, cauldron, wand. He stopped at wand. "This is the conversation," he said. Harry already knew which conversation. He'd known it was coming since he was 8, when Strange had explained the way British wizarding power channels worked, through wands, specifically, through the physical focus of a carved magical instrument that bonded to its user and amplified their native ability. He'd understood, even at 8, that his situation made the standard model complicated. "My magic doesn't need a channel," Harry said. "Your chaos energy doesn't," Strange agreed. "Your sorceress framework doesn't. But the native wizarding component does, and that component is the part that will interact with every piece of British wizarding infrastructure you encounter, Hogwarts, the Ministry, everything built on the tradition you were born into. Suppressing it or bypassing it entirely isn't the move." "So I get a wand," Harry said. "You get a wand," Strange said. "And then we see what happens when a wand bonds with a magical structure that shouldn't exist." Wanda smiled over her coffee. "I love when you phrase things that way. So reassuring." "I'm not trying to be reassuring. I'm trying to be accurate. The two are not mutually exclusive, she said. Harry, finish your toast. We're going to London. Diagon Alley in late July was organized chaos, crowds of magical families with lists and arguments and children who hadn't seen each other in months, owls in cages stacked in front of Elops, a smell of old parchment and cauldron smoke and something floral from the apothecary that Strange identified as Valerian and filed into the category of British magical infrastructure, sensory without breaking stride. They arrived through a portal in the leaky cauldron's back courtyard, which was empty at the time, and Strange sealed the portal and looked at the brick wall that Wanda had read about in one of the books they'd acquired on wizarding culture and was now studying with the slightly assessing expression she gave to magical systems she hadn't encountered before. Tap 3 times, Harry said, pulling out the small smooth stone he'd been using as a practice focus since he was 7. Third brick from the left of the bin, second up. Strange looked at him. When did you, Wong found a book, Harry said. About 2 years ago. I've read everything he could get. Of course you have, Wanda said, and tapped the correct bricks. The wall opened the way described, rotating, folding, resolving into an archway onto a cobblestone street that extended in both directions and was entirely, vibrantly alive with the kind of magic that Harry felt as a deep hum across all 3 of his power systems simultaneously. His wizarding core recognized it, home in the way of deep cellular memory, older than thought. His chaos energy stirred with the ambient magic in the stones, the way it always did in places where magic had been worked for centuries until it was part of the infrastructure. His sorcerous perception unfolded automatically, reading the weave of the place, the layered workings in every shopfront and signpost. He stood in the archway and just let himself feel it for a moment. Overwhelming? Wanda asked, at his shoulder. No, he said. Complete. She squeezed his shoulder once, brief, and they walked in. Strange drew attention the way he always did. The cloak was glamour today, looking like an ordinary dark coat, but the eye of Agamotto was difficult to conceal entirely, and the particular quality of his presence, the way he moved through space with an authority that was not performed but simply structural, made people notice. He ignored this with the ease of long practice. Wanda drew attention of a different kind. She had chosen to dress ordinarily, but there was something about her, the quality of the red in her eyes when the light caught them, the way she tracked magical signatures the way most people tracked movement, that made witches and wizards glance twice. Harry drew the most attention. Not because of anything visible, initially. He was 11, average height for his age, dark-haired, wearing jeans and a jacket over a grey shirt, looking like any muggle-born discovering Diagon Alley for the first time. But wizarding people were magic-sensitive in ways they often didn't consciously register, and something in the ambient magical field responded to Harry's presence with a subtle but detectable shift, a kind of attention, and the people who were sensitive enough felt it and looked for the source and found him, and then looked away quickly, unsure why they'd looked. Gringotts first, Strange said. Gringotts was at the far end of the alley, white and imposing, the kind of building that communicated through architecture that it had been here longer than the civilization that built the street and would outlast whatever civilization replaced it. The goblins at the entrance stood with spears and expressions of comprehensive professional disregard. Harry walked through the doors. The inside was vast and marble-floored and loud with the clinking of coins and the rustling of papers and the movement of a dozen transactions happening simultaneously. Goblin tellers worked behind a long counter with the brisk, absolute efficiency of beings for whom time was money in a very literal and carefully calculated sense. Strange stepped to the counter and was in the middle of explaining the purpose of the visit, accessing the Potter family vault, which had been accruing interest and assets untouched for a decade, when the head teller, a senior goblin with the deeply lined face of a being who had evaluated the worth of empires and found them wanting, stopped mid-transaction and looked past Strange at Harry. The other goblins noticed a second later. It moved down the counter like a ripple, heads turning, each pair of dark eyes finding Harry and then doing something Strange had never seen a goblin do, pausing. Not in alarm, not in threat assessment. In something closer to recognition. The head teller stood from his high chair, which was apparently not standard protocol, and addressed Harry directly. Mr. Potter, he said, in a voice that was precise and dry and carrying a freight of professional assessment. "We have been expecting your visit for some time." "I imagine," Harry said. "Your family vault is in order. The inheritance documents are prepared." The goblin paused, and something moved in his expression, not emotion exactly. Goblins didn't work in human emotion, but the goblin equivalent of a recalibration. "We should note," he said, more carefully, "that the vault authentication process may behave unusually." "Unusually how?" Strange said. "The Potter family vault is keyed to blood recognition. Standard procedure." The goblin looked at Harry. "The enchantments on the vault are old. Ancient, some of them. The oldest authentication layers do not read blood alone. They read," he paused, choosing the word with the precision of a being for whom precision was a professional commitment. "Nature. And mine is unusual," Harry said. "Your nature," the goblin said, "is the first of its kind we have encountered in recorded Gringotts history. Which extends to approximately 1060 years. He said this without fanfare, a professional statement of professional fact. "The vault may need a moment." The vault needed more than a moment. The cart journey down, damp stone tunnels, vertiginous drops, the smell of deep earth and old magic, was normal until they reached the Potter vault level, at which point the torches lining the tunnel began to shift in color without apparent cause, moving from orange through amber into a warm, deep red. Harry watched this without comment. The goblin guide watched it with the face of someone logging an anomaly for the record. The vault door was iron, old and heavy, engraved with the kind of authentication runes that Strange identified as 11th century British tradition. The goblin pressed a claw to the door, blood authentication, and the runes lit up in sequence. Then Harry put his hand on the door, and all three of his power systems responded simultaneously to the ancient magical recognition system, and the vault authentication runes went through their sequence and then added three more runes that had not been there before, emerging from the iron as if they'd always been present and simply waiting for the correct key to make them legible. The vault opened. The goblin looked at the three new runes for a long moment. He said, which Strange suspected was the goblin equivalent of a significant statement. "What do those mean?" Harry asked. The goblin was quiet for 3 seconds, which for a goblin was a long time. "The first is the rune for inheritance in its fullest sense, blood, name, and legacy," he said. "The second is the rune for convergence. The meeting of streams." He paused at the third. "The third is not a rune we have encountered in active use. It exists in our historical records." He looked at Harry with an expression that Strange was now reading as something close to, but professionally maintained at a distance from, respect. "It is the rune our most ancient documents use for the word primordial." Nobody said anything for a moment. "Right," Harry said, and walked into the vault. The vault was full, as 10 years of accumulated interest on a substantial magical inheritance tended to produce, and Harry moved through it with curiosity rather than awe, looking at things, picking up objects to read their magical signature, setting them down. He found his parents' stored personal items in a chest near the back wall, photographs, letters, his father's old Quidditch records, his mother's research journals in her cramped, excited handwriting. He looked at these carefully, set the photographs aside to take, and closed the chest again with the quiet composure of someone who had been processing this particular grief for years and had made his peace with the ongoing nature of it. "You all right?" Wanda said, from beside him. "Yes," he said. "I've seen their faces before. I know who they were." He looked at his mother's journals. "I want these, when I'm ready." "Whenever you're ready," she said. "They'll keep." He took a handful of galleons, more than enough for the supply list, and they went back up. Madame Malkin's first, for robes, which was efficient and unremarkable except for Madame Malkin herself repeatedly adjusting her measuring tape to accommodate the fact that Harry's measurements kept shifting slightly every time the tape passed through an area of active chaos energy, which made her expression cycle between professional and baffled in a way Harry didn't notice and Wanda found quietly entertaining. Then books, from Flourish and Blots, where Harry spent 45 minutes more than strictly necessary and emerged with both the required reading and 8 additional texts on magical theory that were, Strange noted, all at the advanced and post-newt level. The bookseller had looked at the selection, looked at Harry, and elected not to comment. Then the apothecary, then the equipment shop, then the Owl Emporium, where Harry stood at the entrance and looked at the rows of cages with the reading expression. "You don't have to get an owl," Strange said. "The sanctum has communication channels that are faster." "I know," Harry said. He walked to the back of the shop, guided by something, and stopped in front of a cage that held a snowy white owl who was asleep with the decisive commitment of an animal that had made its choices and was comfortable with them. Harry studied the owl. The owl, after a moment, opened one amber eye, regarded Harry with the complete assessment of a predator evaluating a situation, and then closed the eye again. "That one," Harry said. "She wasn't looking for an owner," the shopkeeper said, appearing from behind a shelf. "She's refused everyone for 3 months. Came in by herself, actually, which doesn't usually happen." Harry looked at the cage. The owl opened both eyes this time, and there was a moment of mutual recognition that Strange observed with interest, the magical connection between wizard and familiar snapping into place as cleanly as a lock accepting the right key. The owl stood up, ruffled herself, and presented her leg with the air of someone who has decided to stop waiting and get on with things. "She's been waiting," Harry said. "For what?" the shopkeeper said. Harry opened the cage. The owl stepped onto his arm and regarded the shop with proprietary calm. "For the right moment," he said. He named her Hedwig, which he'd read somewhere and liked the sound of. Ollivander's was the last stop, and the atmosphere in the shop changed the moment they walked through the door. Not dramatically, the shop was dusty and narrow and smelled of sawdust and something older, and the piles of long thin boxes that covered every surface had the organized haphazardness of a system that made perfect sense to exactly one person. But Strange felt the quality of attention in the place shift as Harry entered, the way the sanctum's walls shifted when Harry moved through them at home, the ambient magical intelligence of the place orienting. Garrick Ollivander emerged from between the shelves like a man who had been waiting rather than moving, old, pale, silver eyes with that unsettling quality of looking through the person in front of him to the magic behind them. He looked at Strange first, and his eyes narrowed slightly in recognition, not of Strange personally, but of the class of thing Strange represented, old and significant and not entirely British in its magical tradition. He looked at Wanda, and his expression did something more complex, some instinct recognizing what she was without having the framework to name it. He looked at Harry last, and went very still. "Mr. Potter," he said, very quietly, in a tone that Strange had learned to categorize as the sound a person makes when a thing they've been thinking about for a long time suddenly becomes concrete. "I wondered. I have been wondering for 10 years. He moved closer, slowly, silver eyes moving over Harry with the attention of a craftsman examining a material. "Your mother, beautiful charms work, willow, 10¼ inches, swishy. Your father, mahogany, 11 inches, excellent for transfiguration. Pliable." He paused. "But you." "But me," Harry agreed, with mild interest. "Give me your wand hand," Ollivander said. Harry extended his right hand. Ollivander measured it with a tape that moved on its own, span, length of fingers, width of palm, but also things that weren't purely physical, the tape pausing at his wrist and near his sternum and then above his forehead near the lightning bolt scar, measuring things Strange recognized as magical metrics. The tape finished and Ollivander disappeared into the shelves. He came back with a box. Harry tried it, a neat flick, the standard test motion. The wand produced a shower of purple sparks and then quietly went inert. "No." Another box. Harry tried it. Nothing. "No." Another. The wand vibrated uncomfortably when Harry touched it, like a string tuned to the wrong frequency. "No." Strange watched this process continue through 15 wands, the pile of rejects growing on the counter, Ollivander's expression moving from assessing to intent to something that was plainly and unmistakably fascinated. Wanda had moved to the wall and was watching with her arms folded and the small private smile she got when a situation was being exactly as interesting as she'd expected. Ollivander disappeared into the back of the shop for several minutes. He returned with a single box, and he was carrying it differently, not with the routine professional handling of the others, but with a quality of care that communicated significance without announcing it. He opened it himself and placed the wand on the counter with both hands. It was 11 inches, dark and smooth, made of holly. The core, Ollivander said, in a voice that had gone quiet, was a phoenix feather. One feather, Ollivander said. From a phoenix who gave only 2. Curious thing, the other wand, the one this feather's brother sits in, it gave you that scar. Harry looked at the wand without touching it for a moment. Strange, reading the magical signature of the object, understood immediately why this one had been kept for last. The phoenix feather core resonated with the same deep, generative magic that Strange identified as the love-working, the sacrifice that lived in Harry's scar. Not the same magic. Resonant. The way 2 notes an octave apart were the same note and not the same note. Harry picked up the wand. The shop went silent in a way that was distinct from ordinary quiet, a held-breath quality, the ambient magic in all 5,000 boxes of wands in this room orienting simultaneously toward the point of contact, a current running through the entire accumulated magical weight of the place. Red light moved through Harry's fingers, chaos energy, not performing, just present, and the wand warmed and the phoenix feather in its core pulsed once with gold light that was also, somehow, red, the 2 colors occupying the same space and emerging as something that didn't have a name. Harry swished the wand. A warm golden red light poured from the tip and traced a pattern in the air, not sparks, not a spell, but a shape. Strange recognized it after a half-second. It was the same configuration as the rune that had appeared on the vault door. Primordial. The light faded. The shop was very quiet. Curious, Ollivander said, and his voice had the quality of a man who has just witnessed something that will occupy him for the rest of his professional life. He looked at Harry with those silver eyes that saw through to the magic. Very curious indeed. He paused. I wonder, Mr. Potter, do you know what holly represents, in the old tradition? Protection, Harry said immediately. Specifically the protection of boundaries between what should be and what should not. Warding in its deepest sense. Ollivander blinked. You know wand lore. I've had time to prepare, Harry said. The holly chose you, Ollivander said, and it was clear he was processing this against some framework only he fully understood. The phoenix core chose you. But, he hesitated, which Strange suspected happened rarely. The wand channels magic, Mr. Potter. It does not contain it. Yours will need to understand that. We understand each other, Harry said, looking down at the wand in his hand, and his voice was quiet and certain and Strange believed him completely. Ollivander packaged the wand in its box and placed it on the counter and accepted payment, but when Harry moved toward the door the wand maker spoke once more. Mr. Potter. Harry turned. The wand chooses the wizard, Ollivander said. But in your case, I think it was more of a negotiation. Harry smiled, brief, genuine. Most things worth keeping are, he said. They were halfway back down Diagon Alley, supply list complete, when the crowd ahead of them parted slightly and a tall figure in deep blue robes and a hat that appeared to be genuinely half-moon-shaped stepped out of flourish and blots with the precise unhurried timing of someone who had planned their route to intercept. Albus Dumbledore looked exactly as Strange had imagined from the accumulated impressions in 10 years of letters and intelligence, ancient, warm, silver-bearded, with eyes behind half-moon spectacles that were blue and sharp and containing the particular quality of wisdom that Strange recognized because he'd met it in other forms, the wisdom of someone who had learned a great deal and was accustomed to having that learning be the most significant thing in any room. Those eyes found Harry, and something moved in them, relief, recognition, a depth of feeling that was genuine, Strange noted, not performed. Whatever Dumbledore's strategies were, his care was real. That mattered and also wasn't sufficient. Harry, Dumbledore said, and his voice was warm and unhurried. I had hoped we might have the chance to speak before Hogwarts. Headmaster Dumbledore, Harry said, and his voice was level and pleasant and gave absolutely nothing away. Strange noted with quiet satisfaction that Harry had read the room immediately, the timing, the positioning, the casual presentation of what was clearly a prepared encounter, and had responded by becoming very still and very attentive. Dumbledore's eyes moved to Strange and Wanda. "Dr. Strange," he said. "Ms. Maximoff." A pause. "I must say, you have proven to be rather more difficult to reach than I anticipated. I find that effective communication requires both parties to want to communicate," Strange said, pleasantly. Dumbledore smiled, and it was a good smile, genuine and self-aware and not without humor. "A fair point." He looked at Harry again. "You look well, Harry. Very well, in fact." His eyes moved over Harry with the deep assessment of a man who could read magical signatures the way others read body language, and his expression registered what he found with careful neutrality that Strange watched closely. "I am well," Harry said. "Thank you. I wonder if we might speak privately." "We can speak here," Harry said. "Not rudely. Simply. I don't have private conversations that my guardians aren't aware of. We haven't established the kind of relationship that would make that appropriate." A small silence. Dumbledore absorbed this with the grace of a man who was recalibrating, and Strange could see the recalibration happening, the adjustment of expectation, the quiet revision of whatever Harry he had been imagining against the Harry standing in front of him. It was interesting to watch. "Of course," Dumbledore said. "Then let me say simply, I am glad you're safe, and I look forward to seeing you at Hogwarts." "I think you'll find it home," Harry said, and something moved briefly in his expression. "I know. I've read its history. Hogwarts was founded by 4 wizards who believed that magical education should be available and excellent and given without reservation. I believe that too." He paused. "I also know there's a protected corridor on the 3rd floor this year that you'd prefer first years didn't investigate. I'll respect that." Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "How? There's a troll going to be let into the building on Halloween," Harry said. "Not by you, by someone working against you. I imagine you have contingencies, but I wanted you to know I'm aware, so that if I respond to it you understand why I'm not where I'm supposed to be." He looked at the headmaster with the green eyes that saw through things. "I'm not trying to undermine you. I'm trying to be honest with you so we can work together rather than at cross purposes." The crowd moved around them. An owl hooted from somewhere above. Diagon Alley continued its loud, specific life on all sides. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment, and Strange watched the man genuinely revise his understanding of the situation in real time, which was, Strange thought, to his credit. A lesser strategist would have maintained the planned approach regardless. "I see," Dumbledore said, quietly, and there was a note in his voice that Strange identified as the sound of someone meeting an unexpected equal. "Then I look forward to working with you, Harry." "I look forward to it too," Harry said, and meant it, which was perhaps the most disarming thing he could have said. They walked away. Dumbledore stood in the middle of Diagon Alley and watched them go, and Strange did not look back because he didn't need to. He'd seen the expression, a man who had expected to find a chess piece and found instead someone sitting on the other side of the board. "Troll on Halloween," Wanda said, after half a minute, keeping her voice low and conversational. "You didn't tell us that." "I read it in one of the histories Wong found," Harry said. "It's not certain, it's a probability. The same person who let the troll in is the same person who's going to try to steal something from the school." "The stone," Strange said. "Yes. You know about that too." "I read the signatures in Gringotts today," Harry said, simply. There was a vault that had recently been cleared. The residue suggested something small, very powerful, alchemical in nature. "Nicholas Flamel's work has a specific signature. I cross-referenced it against Wanda's Library of Advanced Magical Theory." He paused. "It's at Hogwarts now. Under heavy protection. And something wearing a professor's face wants it. Strange and Wanda exchanged a look over Harry's head, the specific look that had evolved over 10 years of co-parenting a child who consistently exceeded both of them in lateral thinking. When you say something wearing a professor's face, Wanda said. There's a fragment of Voldemort's soul attached to the defense against the dark arts teacher, Harry said, without drama. I could feel it from across the alley when I saw him near Madame Malkin's. It's the same signature as my scar, the same foreign presence, but unstable. Parasitic. He looked at Strange. The piece in my scar is contained. His isn't. They had reached the leaky cauldron and Strange opened the back door to the courtyard without tapping the bricks, which he'd known how to do since the first letter arrived, and closed it behind them. Harry, he said. Yes. What are you planning to do about all of this? Harry thought about it with the methodical honesty he always brought to the question of plans. Go to school, he said. Learn what Hogwarts can teach me, which is genuinely significant. British magical tradition has a history and a depth that I respect and want to be part of. Make friends, if I can find people worth making friends with. Deal with the stone situation when it becomes necessary to deal with it, and not before. And Dumbledore? Work with him, Harry said. He loves that school and the people in it. That matters. But, a pause. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what I know or be what he expected. I think honestly is better, even if it's less convenient. Less convenient for him, Strange said. For both of us, probably. Harry looked at the courtyard wall, thinking. He spent 10 years building a plan around the idea that I'd arrive frightened and uninformed and grateful for guidance. That version of me was never going to exist. It's not his fault he didn't know that. He looked at Strange. But it's not my job to become that version to make his plan easier. Strange looked at him, this 11-year-old who had the political and strategic clarity of a general and the emotional honesty of someone who had never once been taught to weaponize their feelings, and felt the complicated, inconvenient, thoroughly wonderful thing that he felt regularly and still didn't have a word for. No, he said. It's absolutely not. They opened the portal home. The courtyard of the leaky cauldron was empty in the afternoon light, old brick warm in the summer sun, and London moved on all sides in its enormous, complicated way. Strange stepped through. Wanda stepped through. Harry looked back at the wall for a moment, at the archway that led back to Diagon Alley, back to the wizarding world that was his birthright, that had been waiting for him, that thought it knew who he was. Hedwig shifted on his shoulder, amber eyes forward and bright. He stepped through the portal. The weeks before September 1st had a particular quality, not countdown exactly, more like the feeling before a door opens into a room you've been reading about your whole life. Harry trained with focused intensity, Strange noted, not with anxiety but with the precision of someone who wanted to arrive prepared and considered preparation to be respect for the thing being prepared for. He spent 3 days rereading every text he'd acquired on standard British magical theory, making notes in the margins with the cramped, efficient handwriting he'd developed somewhere around age 8. He spent 2 evenings with Wanda working on the specific skill of containing his chaos energy into the narrow channel of wand work, not suppressing it, but giving it a path that would look, to outside observers, like ordinary powerful wizardry. Can you feel the difference? Wanda asked, after the second session. Harry held the holly wand and sent a standard lumos through it, and the light that emerged was clean and white and entirely ordinary except for the quality of warmth in it, the depth of illumination that wasn't brightness exactly but presence. Yes, he said. It's like speaking quietly in a room where you could shout. Can you sustain it? I can. He turned the wand in his hand. It's going to be boring. Wanda laughed, which was an actual laugh, warm and real. Yes, she said. Parts of it will be. Parts won't. On the last evening before he left, Strange found Harry in the library, not studying, for once, just sitting in the large chair by the window with Hedwig on the armrest and the cloak draped over his shoulders in its habitual position, looking out at the street below where Greenwich Village moved through its evening in the ordinary, unknowing way of places that happened to neighbor the extraordinary, Strange made tea, which was not a thing he did often, and carried 2 cups to the library and sat across from Harry without preamble. Harry accepted the tea and wrapped both hands around it and said nothing, which was the way their best conversation started. "Things will move quickly," Strange said. "I know. People will make decisions about who you are before you've said a word. The scar, the name, they'll project the version of Harry Potter they've been told about. Let them," Harry said. "It'll clarify quickly. Some of them will want things from you. Some of them will want things from anyone powerful," Harry said. "That's not specific to me." Strange drank his tea. Outside, the streetlights were coming on, amber pools in the darkening street, and the sanctum's walls did their evening settling, the old magic in the building moving through its nightly check of itself like a giant breathing out. "There will be a moment," Strange said, choosing his words with the care he gave to things that mattered. "Probably this year, possibly later, where the path of least resistance will be to let someone else make the call. Dumbledore, or the situation, or the narrative that the wizarding world has built around your name. It will feel like the easier option." "It won't be," Harry said. "No. Because someone else's plan for me isn't a plan," Harry said. "It's a constraint." He looked at Strange over his tea, and those green eyes were clear and steady and entirely themselves. "You've been getting at this for a while. You're worried I'll defer. I'm noting the risk." "I know." Harry was quiet for a moment. "I won't. Not because I'm stubborn, because I've thought about it and I understand what I am and what I'm for, and it doesn't match what anyone else has planned." He paused. "I'm not going to hide my powers, I'm not going to pretend I'm ordinary, and I'm not going to let someone put me where they need me to be and call it destiny. A beat. That's not arrogance. That's just clarity." "Yes," Strange said. "That's exactly what it is." They finished their tea in comfortable silence, and the cloak shifted on Harry's shoulders with the particular quality of an old friend settling in for the night, and Hedwig opened one eye and closed it again with the decisive satisfaction of an animal who had assessed the situation and found it adequate. At platform 9 3/4 the following morning, Strange handed Harry his trunk and held the portal open, and Wanda straightened his collar in the way she'd been doing since he was small and did not make it sentimental, just quick and precise, and Harry stepped through onto the platform where steam and noise and the massive Scarlet engine of the Hogwarts Express filled the space with the controlled magnificent chaos of a beginning. He looked back once. "We'll know if you need us," Strange said. "I know," Harry said. "I won't." "We know," Wanda said. "Go." He went. The portal closed. Wanda stood on the Greenwich Village sidewalk in the September morning, hands in her coat pockets, and said nothing for a moment. "He'll be fine," Strange said. "I know he'll be fine," she said. "I'm not worried about fine. I'm thinking about what comes after fine." She looked at the space where the portal had been. "He's going to change that place. The wizarding world. All of it." Her red eyes were distant and reading something Strange couldn't see. "It's been static for too long. Calcified around its own traditions. It needs what he is. It doesn't know that yet." "No," she said, and the small, certain smile came back. "But it will." They walked back into the sanctum, and the building adjusted to the particular, specific quiet of a house with one fewer person in it, and somewhere in the east wing the room that had been Harry's held its furniture and its books and the small careful arrangement of a life in progress, and waited, the way the sanctum had always been good at waiting, for the return of the thing that made it most fully itself. Chapter 4, Hogwarts does not know what it has. The Sorting Hat sat on Harry's head for 11 seconds. This was not, in itself, remarkable. The hat sometimes deliberated for minutes, the famously difficult cases where competing qualities made the decision genuinely complex. But 11 seconds wasn't deliberation. The hat went quiet for 11 seconds in the way that a person goes quiet when they've encountered something that requires not a decision but a fundamental recategorization of the available options. Then it spoke, and it did not say a house name. It said, very clearly, in a voice that carried across the great hall, "extraordinary." The hall was silent. 400 students and 8 professors and 1 headmaster sat in the candlelit space under the enchanted ceiling, which tonight showed a clear September sky brilliant with stars, and every one of them was looking at the dark-haired boy on the stool who was sitting with the contained patience of someone who had decided, going in, that this was an experience to observe rather than perform. Harry waited. The hat recovered itself. "Courage sufficient for 3 Gryffindors," it said, apparently deciding on narration, which was unusual. Typically it named the house and moved on. "A mind that rivals the finest I have placed in Ravenclaw. Loyalty and a generosity of spirit that Hufflepuff builds its best on." A pause. "And an ambition, though not the kind that Slytherin traditionally prizes. The ambition of someone who wants to understand everything, not rule it." Another pause, longer. "There is something else. Something I have no house for, and I have been sorting students for 1,000 years. The hat stopped again. Dumbledore, at the head table, was very still. "Gryffindor," the hat announced, with the decisive energy of something that has made a choice and is committing to it, and then added, at a volume that was definitely unnecessary, "but do not think the other houses wouldn't have made him excellent." The Gryffindor table erupted. The other tables applauded with varying degrees of bewilderment. Harry took the hat off, handed it back to Professor McGonagall, who was looking at him with an expression that was working very hard to remain professional, and walked to the Gryffindor table with the calm of someone who had rehearsed this particular reality and found the actual version within expected parameters. He sat. A red-haired boy across from him immediately leaned forward. "What did it say to you?" the boy demanded. "Inside, I mean. What did it actually say?" Harry looked at him. Freckled, open face, the kind of person whose emotions were visible from space, 6 older brothers if you counted the family resemblance in the people along the table. "It said it needed a minute," Harry said. The boy stared. Then he burst out laughing. "I'm Ron," he said. "Ron Weasley. Harry Potter." Ron's eyes went immediately to the scar, which was there, faintly visible above Harry's fringe. Every eye at the table did the same thing, and Harry felt the weight of it, the collective recalibration, the adjustment of expectations, the projection of a story onto a person who hadn't agreed to be in it. He didn't react to it. He understood it. "You're actually Harry Potter," said a girl to his left, dark-haired, already looking at him as though he were a problem to be evaluated. She had a book open on her lap under the table, which Harry noted with warm recognition as the action of someone who valued information over ceremony. "Hermione Granger," she said. "I've read about you. The history, I mean, the defeat of you-know-who, the prophecy. All of it. What have you read?" Harry asked, genuinely. She blinked. Apparently not the question she'd expected. "Hogwarts, a history, mostly, which mentions the prophecy context. And there's a section in modern magical history that, modern magical history gets the magical mechanics of the curse rebound wrong," Harry said. "The author assumes it was a standard Protego variant. It wasn't. But the section on the broader political context of the First Wizarding War is solid." Another blink. Ron was looking between them with the expression of someone watching a very fast tennis match. "Right," Hermione said, and there was something in her voice that was cautious and curious in equal measure, the tone of a person who had expected to be the most prepared person in the room and was revising that assessment. "You've done research." "I've had time," Harry said. The feast appeared, and the conversation expanded to include the other first years in earshot, and Harry let it flow around him, participating easily, reading the room in the way he'd learned to, not with suspicion but with the attentive interest of someone for whom people were genuinely interesting. Ron Weasley was direct and warm and funny in an unguarded way that Harry found immediately likable. Hermione Granger was sharp and thorough and had the quality of someone who learned everything about subjects they cared about and had no time at all for subjects they didn't, which Harry understood completely. A boy named Neville Longbottom sat 3 seats down and was so nervous he'd knocked over his pumpkin juice twice, and Harry had quietly repaired the spill both times without comment, which Neville had noticed and looked at with an expression of relieved gratitude. Above the feast, the enchanted ceiling shifted with the real sky outside, stars moving through their slow courses, and the great hall moved with food and noise and the particular energy of a beginning. Harry ate, and talked, and kept one layer of awareness on Quirinus Quirrell at the staff table. The defense against the dark arts professor was a slight, turbaned man who appeared nervous in the generalized way of someone performing a character and maintaining it with effort. He was sitting at the far end of the table, and he was not looking at Harry, was, in fact, carefully and deliberately not looking at Harry, which was the tell. Everyone else at the staff table had looked. The one person who had reason to want to assess Harry up close was the one person working not to make eye contact. The foreign presence Harry had felt in Diagon Alley was clear now, this close. Sitting behind Quirrell's ordinary anxiety like a stone beneath moving water, cold, ancient, patient, and full of a hatred so refined by decades of intent that it had become almost impersonal. The way extreme cold stopped feeling like temperature and started feeling like fact. Harry ate his roast chicken and did not look at Quirrell and filed away everything he needed. The dungeons of Hogwarts were old in the way that only places saturated with centuries of magic got old, not decaying, but deep, the stone carrying impressions the way Wanda had described the sanctum's walls. Harry felt it on his first walk through the corridors on the second day, history in the walls, the accumulated weight of 1,000 years of people learning things and discovering things and occasionally blowing things up. He loved it with an immediacy that surprised him, the way you sometimes love things you already knew you'd love but the reality still lands harder than the anticipation. Charms was his first class of substance. Professor Flitwick was a small man with the focused energy of someone for whom magic was a genuine, ongoing delight, and his classroom had the feel of a place where things were regularly expected to be amazing. The first-year curriculum opened with basic wand movements and incantation, and Harry sat in the middle of the class with Ron on one side and Hermione on the other and worked through the early material with the quiet, clean execution of someone for whom basic wand technique was the equivalent of a professional musician playing scales, fundamentally correct, effortlessly precise, and not the interesting part. Flitwick noticed. Not the first day, when everyone was finding their footing and Harry was careful to be good without being excessive. But by the third class, when the work had advanced to the first practical charms of the curriculum and Harry was producing results that were technically correct and also carrying that additional quality, the warmth, the depth, the slight dimensional resonance that his magic always had, Flitwick stopped at his desk and looked at the completed charm with the face of a man who has found something interesting in a place he didn't expect to find it. "Mr. Potter," he said, at a pitch only Harry could hear. "A question, if I may." "Of course, Professor." "That charm is correct. It's also doing 3 things that the standard incantation doesn't do. The light it produces is operating in the visible spectrum, yes, but also in the near-ultraviolet, and it's producing a faint harmonic resonance in the adjacent metaphysical layer." Flitwick looked at the charm again. "I've been teaching for 34 years. I've never seen a Lumos do that." "I wasn't trying to do those things," Harry said honestly. "My magic tends to be thorough." Flitwick absorbed this with the speed of a man whose professional curiosity was faster than his surprise. "Thorough," he repeated. "Is it consistent? Does it always extend into adjacent layers?" "More or less. It varies with the complexity of the working." "Extraordinary," said Flitwick, in almost exactly the same tone the Sorting Hat had used, which Harry noted as an emerging pattern. The professor straightened. "Mr. Potter, I would, at your convenience, and entirely voluntary, very much like to discuss your magical background. Not from any official standpoint. Academic curiosity." "I'd enjoy that," Harry said, and meant it. "Excellent." Flitwick moved on. But Harry caught him making a note, and thought that Flitwick's particular brand of honest enthusiasm was going to make him genuinely valuable to talk to, and added him to the short mental list of people at Hogwarts worth real intellectual engagement. Transfiguration was McGonagall's domain, and McGonagall ran it like someone who had absolute faith in the discipline and zero patience for anything less than genuine effort. She was already familiar with Harry in the way that involved not making it obvious she was familiar with Harry. She treated him with the same exacting standards she applied to everyone, which Harry found more respectful than any special attention would have been. The class worked on turning matchsticks into needles, which was standard first-year material and required the specific mental engagement of a genuine transfiguration, not an illusion, not a charm applied to the surface, but a real material transformation worked through focused will and precise technique. Most of the class got partial transformations by the end of the lesson. Hermione got a perfect needle on her fourth attempt, which produced a brief nod from McGonagall and visible satisfaction from Hermione. Ron got a matchstick that was silver-colored but still a matchstick, which he examined with cheerful philosophical acceptance. Harry looked at his matchstick, held it between his fingers, and applied the technique. The transformation was immediate and complete, and also slightly more than complete. The needle that sat on his desk was perfect in every material sense and also had a faint structural solidity that went beyond what a transfigured match could reasonably be expected to have, as if his magic, given the instruction to make a needle, had made the most needle it was capable of. He set it on the desk and looked at it. McGonagall appeared at his shoulder so quickly he almost missed it. She looked at the needle. She picked it up and tested it. Then she looked at Harry with the expression Strange made when confronted with something outside his calculated parameters, not alarmed, just rigorously attentive. "When did you do this?" she said. "Just now," Harry said. "You've had no prior transfiguration instruction." "I know the theory. The practice is the first time." He paused, then decided honesty was better. "My magical background is broad. Some of it probably informs the execution even when I haven't done the specific exercise before." McGonagall set the needle down and looked at him for 3 full seconds, which on McGonagall's face was a long time. "Broad," she said. "Yes, Professor." "We'll speak after class," she said, in the tone of someone issuing an instruction that was going to lead somewhere significant and knew it. After class, she asked Harry about his magical training with the direct efficiency of a person who wanted accurate information and was prepared to receive it without editorial. Harry told her, sorceress training under Dr. Strange, chaos magic theory and practice with Wanda Maximoff, foundational theory and multidisciplinary magical history with Wong. He did not undersell or oversell any of it. He gave her the accurate version and let her draw her conclusions. McGonagall, to her enormous credit, drew them quickly and accurately. "You are," she said, after a brief silence, "the most unusually prepared first year I have encountered in 39 years of teaching." She picked up her quill. "You are also," she added, "James and Lily Potter's son, which means the academic preparation is probably accompanied by a complete willingness to deploy it in ways that keep professors awake at night." Harry smiled. "I'll try to keep the property damage to a minimum," he said. McGonagall almost smiled back. "Almost. See that you do, Mr. Potter." The defense against the dark arts classroom smelled of garlic, which most of the class attributed to the braids of it festooning the walls with no apparent purpose. Harry knew exactly what purpose it served. Quirrell was trying to suppress the presence on the back of his head, the foreign dark energy that pressed against everything, and garlic was one of the older apotropaic workings in British magical tradition, basically useless against something of this power but attempted anyway. It said something about the relationship between Quirrell and his passenger that the man was still trying. The class sat down, and Quirrell began speaking, and he was a terrible teacher in the specific way of someone whose attention was mostly elsewhere. Stuttering, halting, circling back on himself, occasionally losing his place in his own sentences with an absent quality that wasn't natural nervousness but something watching through him getting distracted by its own thoughts. Harry sat near the back of the class and watched Quirrell and watched the class's reaction to Quirrell and observed, with the multi-layered perception he couldn't entirely turn off, the state of the dark fragment that lived behind the turban. It was aware of Harry. Not with certainty, with the instinct of something that had been looking for a particular frequency for a decade and was now registering a signal it recognized but hadn't expected here, in this form. The cold patience in it was threaded through with something that was, Harry recognized, the particular quality of a mind encountering a problem it needs to solve. Voldemort, or the fragment of Voldemort, was thinking. Harry took careful notes on the class material, which was significantly below his knowledge level and interesting mainly as an introduction to how Hogwarts structured the subject, and said nothing. Until Quirrell, getting through a section on defensive principles, said something that was not just wrong but actively dangerous wrong, advice about managing a dark magical encounter that would, if followed precisely, leave a student more vulnerable rather than less. Harry raised his hand. Quirrell noticed it with the slightly delayed quality of a man whose processing was shared. Yes, Mr. Peapotter. The technique you've described, the passive dissolution approach for a corporeal dark entity, Harry said, pleasantly, creates an energy vacuum at the point of application. Against an active dark entity, that vacuum draws the entity's attention rather than dispersing it. The correct approach is an active redirection that doesn't create a pressure differential. A silence in the class. Ron, beside him, was looking between Harry and Quirrell with the expression he'd started developing, an alert wariness, like a person who knows something interesting is about to happen and is positioning for the best view. Quirrell stared at Harry. The cold presence behind his eyes sharpened. That is, not the standard, it's not the standard approach, Harry agreed. The standard approach is wrong. The person who codified it in the 1840s never encountered a corporeal entity with active projection capability. If you'd like, I can demonstrate the correct technique on the charm model at the front. It's a 5-second demonstration. The class was very quiet. Hermione was looking at Harry with an expression that was reading as fascinated and slightly alarmed in a ratio she was still calculating. Quirrell's mouth opened, closed. The dark presence behind him pressed forward slightly and then pulled back, and Harry felt the decision being made, not here, not yet, too public, too early, and watched Quirrell find his way back to professional footing. We will cover active redirection in a later lesson, Quirrell said. I'll look forward to it, Harry said. After class, in the corridor, Ron fell into step beside him. Did you just argue with a professor? He said, in a tone of pure delighted disbelief. I corrected an error, Harry said. Same thing. Not really. Harry shifted his bag on his shoulder. He gave advice that would get someone hurt. Correcting it wasn't optional. Ron thought about this for the length of a corridor. The way you said it, though, he said. You weren't scared at all. Why would I be scared? Ron opened his mouth and closed it. Most people would be, he said. Arguing with a professor in front of everyone. I wasn't arguing, Harry said. I was right. Those are different things too. He looked at Ron. Do you want to see the actual technique? It's more interesting than what he described. Ron's face did the thing it did when something collided with both his skepticism and his curiosity simultaneously, and curiosity won. Yeah, he said. Yeah, all right. Hermione, 2 steps behind them and pretending she hadn't been listening to the entire conversation, said, I want to see it too, without looking up from her book. Harry smiled. Library at 7, he said. The library session became a regular thing without anyone officially deciding it was a regular thing, it simply recurred, on the basis that all 3 of them had information the others found useful, and the specific dynamic of Harry knowing things and Hermione knowing things and Ron being the person who asked the questions that turned out to be the important ones had established itself in the first week with the efficiency of something meant to be. Harry discovered that Hogwarts's library was both better and more limited than he'd expected. Better, because the magical theory sections contained texts he genuinely hadn't encountered and the historical archives went deep in ways that interested him. Limited, because the restricted section had a bureaucratic access process that slowed things down, and because large portions of genuinely interesting magical theory apparently lived in private collections and ministry archives rather than educational settings. He also discovered, in the 3rd week of term, that the castle itself was paying attention to him. Not in a threatening way, in the way the sanctum paid attention to Harry, the deep ambient awareness of a very old magical structure recognizing something it understood on a frequency below consciousness. Hogwarts moved around him in subtle ways, doors that opened a fraction of a second before he reached them, corridors that lit themselves ahead of his path, the staircases that rearranged themselves for everyone, showing a consistent preference for directing Harry toward specific locations that turned out, on investigation, to be the oldest parts of the castle, the places where the founding magic was most concentrated. He told Hermione about this on a Thursday evening, because she was the person he'd identified as most likely to receive this information and immediately make useful connections. She stared at him. "The castle is navigating you somewhere?" "Toward itself," Harry said. "The oldest parts. I think it's curious." "A building cannot be curious," she said, and then immediately, "Hogwarts, a history does mention that the castle has a form of ambient awareness, but it's generally understood to be passive. Most things that are called passive are just quiet," Harry said. He was looking at the library ceiling, reading the old magic in the stone. "It knows I'm different. It's known since the sorting. It's been investigating." Hermione looked at the ceiling too, with the expression of someone for whom the existence of a sentient building raised approximately 47 questions that needed immediate sequential answers. What does it want?" "To understand what I am," Harry said. "Same as everyone else." Ron looked up from the chess set he'd been quietly organizing. "What do you tell it?" Harry considered this. "The same thing I tell everyone," he said. "The truth. Just in a language it understands." He pressed his palm flat on the library table, the way he'd done to the sanctum walls since he was small, and let the magic in the stone read him, not controlling it, just opening the door, the three systems of his power present and unhidden, chaos energy and sorceress framework and native wizarding magic sitting in open view the way you sit in open view when you have nothing to hide. The stone was warm and very old, and its awareness moved through his palm like deep water. Then it settled. Accepted. Hermione watched this with her quill frozen above her parchment. "What just happened?" she said. "I introduced myself properly," Harry said, and took his hand back. She wrote something down. He didn't look at what it was, but her expression had the quality it got when she'd understood something and was deciding how to integrate it. "You do that," she said, slowly. "You make things understand you. Without performing anything. You just let them see," Harry said. "Why doesn't it frighten you? What you are, what you can do, most people would be terrified of that much power." Harry thought about it. "Because the people who raised me never treated it like something to be afraid of," he said. "They treated it like something to understand. Fear closes down. Understanding opens up." He picked up his quill. "Also, the power isn't the point. The power is just the tool. What you do with it, that's the part worth thinking about." Hermione was quiet for a moment, in the way that meant she was revising something at a foundational level. "Then, who raised you?" "Dr. Strange. Wanda Maximoff." He watched her process the names. The wizarding world didn't know Strange or Wanda in the way that, say, Dumbledore was known, but Hermione was Muggle-raised, and the names landed with the particular weight they'd have for someone who had access to both worlds of information. "The Sorcerer Supreme," she said. "And the Scarlet Witch." "Yes. You were raised by," she stopped. Started again. "And your magic is, all of it," Harry said. "Yes." Ron set down his chess piece and looked at Harry with the absolute level directness he applied to things he'd decided were important. "Right," he said. "So, you're a wizard, and a sorcerer, and the chaos magic thing, all at once," Harry confirmed. "And Voldemort's, don't," Hermione said sharply, at the name. Ron blinked. "Why, fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself," Harry said, and Hermione shot him a look of pure vindicated relief. "Voldemort. He's not gone. He's here, partially. We're dealing with it." "We," Ron repeated. "You two are the first people at this school I trust," Harry said, simply and directly, which was the way he said things that were true. "That means something." It also means that what I just told you is information you carry carefully. Ron and Hermione looked at each other. Then back at Harry. The library was quiet around them, old and warm and attentive. Right, Ron said, in the voice of someone who has made a decision. What do we do? We wait, Harry said. Watch. Learn the school. When the situation moves, we move with it. He looked at the chessboard. Can you teach me to play better? I can calculate the optimal moves, but I'm missing something in the intuition. Ron's entire face changed, from serious to genuinely delighted. Yeah, he said, and began resetting the board with the focused energy of a person who has found their area of expertise. Okay. First thing you need to understand about chess is that calculation is not enough. Harry picked up a pawn and listened, and outside the library windows the Hogwarts sky moved through its evening, and in the walls the very old magic settled and kept its watch. October moved through its weeks with the rhythm of a school finding its pace, and Harry moved through it, classes and meals and the library and early mornings on the Quidditch pitch watching the older students practice, not because he'd been scouted yet but because the physics of it interested him, the interplay of broom magic and aerial dynamics and the specific magical properties of the snitch, which was an enchanted object of considerable sophistication for something the size of a walnut. He was watching from the stands one afternoon when a broom ridden by a second-year Gryffindor, executing a turn too fast and at the wrong angle, threw the rider. The boy came off at 40 feet with the terrible clarity of an incident happening too fast for normal intervention. Harry was in the air before he'd consciously decided, which was the way the best responses worked, not thought, not impulsive, the training and the instinct arriving at the same action simultaneously. He didn't take the stairs. He stepped off the stands, and the sorcerous levitation that Strange had taught him was already operating before his feet left the platform, and he crossed 40 feet of open air in 2 seconds and caught the boy 6 feet above the ground with both arms and the practiced ease of someone for whom managing momentum was a foundational skill. He set the boy, shaken, white-faced, entirely uninjured, on the grass, and looked up to find the entire Quidditch practice suspended in midair, 14 students on brooms at various heights, staring down at him. McGonagall was on the pitch in under a minute, which Harry respected as remarkable response time. She assessed the situation, confirmed the second year was unhurt, turned to Harry, and looked at him for 3 seconds with the evaluating expression that by now he could read fluently. It meant, I am deciding how to respond to this. That, she said, was either extraordinarily reckless or extraordinarily controlled. Which was it? Controlled, Harry said. You were not using a broom. No. You used magic to not hit the ground at 40 feet, yes. She was quiet for a moment, and Harry watched the decision being made in real time, the decision to ask questions or the decision to act on information. Mr. Potter, she said. Have you ever played Quidditch? No. Can you fly without a broom? Yes. On a broom? I imagine so. I understand the physical principles. She produced a Nimbus 2000 from, Harry was not entirely sure where, and held it out to him with the air of someone testing a hypothesis. He took the broom, swung a leg over it, oriented to the sensation of the broom's own magic communicating with his innate wizarding power the way a good wand did, and lifted off the ground to about 20 feet with the clean ease of someone for whom defying gravity was, at this point, redundant as a challenge but interesting as an experience. The broom's magic resonated with his. Not just accepting him, engaging with him, the way his holly wand did, recognizing something in his magical structure and extending toward it. He flew a slow lap of the pitch at moderate speed, reading the broom's response, adjusting. Then he accelerated. Flying was, he hadn't expected this. He'd levitated himself since he was 9. He'd moved through dimensional space with Strange since he was 10. But this was different. This was the specific sensation of a magical tool designed entirely for this purpose, optimized for a tradition that had been refining it for centuries, syncing with native wizarding magic that apparently included an innate aptitude for it that he hadn't known was there, and the combination was, he hit the end of the pitch, banked hard, and came back at full speed and pulled up 6 feet from the ground into a hover that stopped with a precision that made the Quidditch team on their brooms. Above him go very quiet. McGonagall, below him, had her arms folded and an expression that Harry was reading as fiercely suppressed delight. "Right," she said. "Seeker. Can you start Saturday?" "Yes," Harry said. Ron, who had apparently materialized from somewhere during the flight, was standing at the edge of the pitch with the expression of a person who has just had their entire frame of reference pleasantly obliterated. You just flew like that," he said. "Without ever doing it before." "It's intuitive," Harry said, landing and dismounting cleanly. "That," Ron said, with great feeling, "is the most unfair thing I have ever seen in my life, and I have 6 brothers." Halloween arrived the way Harry had been tracking it, not with dread, with the focus of someone who knows the shape of the thing coming and has a plan. He'd told McGonagall, quietly, the week before. "Not everything, enough. There will be a troll in the dungeons tonight," he'd said, after a transfiguration class, while the rest of the students filed out. "Let into the castle deliberately. The same person who let it in wants the chaos to cover movement toward the 3rd floor." McGonagall had looked at him with an expression that had several components cycling through it rapidly. "How do you know this?" "Probability and observation," Harry said. "I've been watching the patterns of movement on the 3rd floor since term started. Something is being attempted in stages. Tonight is one of the stages." He paused. "You don't have to take my word for it. I'm just giving you the information so that the people who need to know it have it before the troll appears." She'd taken his word for it, which, Harry thought, said good things about McGonagall's judgment, and had spoken to Dumbledore, and whatever preparation was put in place he wasn't entirely informed of. What happened on Halloween evening followed the broad outline he predicted with the variation that real events always had. A troll was indeed let into the dungeons, Quirrell's announcement sent the school into controlled panic, and in the movement toward dormitories the piece Harry hadn't accounted for was Hermione, who had been in the bathroom on the 2nd floor and hadn't heard the announcement. He knew where she was because Hermione's movements were, after 2 months, fairly legible to him, and the piece that didn't fit was her absence from the crowd in the corridor. He grabbed Ron. "Bathroom, 2nd floor," he said. "She doesn't know." They moved against the flow of students heading up, Ron slightly behind and already reaching for his wand with the instinctive decisiveness of someone who ran toward things rather than away from them when the things involved people he knew. They found the troll in the 2nd floor girls' bathroom, 11 feet of gray-green, club-swinging mountain troll that had apparently made a navigational decision based on the available space and Hermione's scent. Hermione was pressed against the far wall, frozen in the specific quality of shock that comes when something is real that you'd only previously known to be real in books. The troll swung its club and took out a row of sinks. Harry stepped through the door and assessed the situation in the 3 seconds the troll spent turning toward the noise, and the calculation was simple. The troll was large, physically very powerful, magically null, it was muscle and bone and very little threat to him directly, but significant threat to Hermione, who was against a wall it was standing between him and to the infrastructure of the bathroom, which was already significantly damaged. He raised his wand, sent a Wingardium Leviosa at the troll's club with the controlled ease of someone who'd been doing comparable working since age 7, and the club left the troll's hand, rose to the ceiling, and stayed there. The troll looked at the ceiling. Then at Harry. Harry looked back at it. The troll charged. Harry stepped to the left and redirected it with a depulso at a force level that was considerably above what the standard charm produced in a first year. The troll hit the far wall with enough authority that the tiles cracked and it slid down, stunned, and sat there with the expression of something whose understanding of how this was supposed to go had been entirely contradicted by experience. Hermione had slid along the wall to the door. Ron had his wand out and was looking from Harry to the troll to Harry again with the expression of someone trying to calibrate what exactly he'd just watched. "Is it?" Hermione started. Stunned, Harry said. "It'll be fine in 10 minutes. We should go." He looked at her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. She was still pale, but her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was processing rapidly, cataloging what she'd observed and integrating it, and Harry recognized it because it was the thing he did himself. "You didn't use a levitation charm on it," she said. "I used it on the club," Harry said. "The depulso, that force level isn't in the standard curriculum, Hermione," Ron said, gesturing at the unconscious troll. "Maybe the analysis later." She straightened her robes. "Right," she said. "Yes. Of course." Then, to Harry, in a tone that was quiet and direct, "Thank you." "You would have figured a way out," Harry said, and he meant it. "I just got there first." The teachers arrived in a group approximately 90 seconds later, McGonagall, Quirrell, Snape, and found a stunned troll, 3 undamaged first years, and a bathroom that had been redecorated significantly by the troll's opening moves. McGonagall's eyes moved through the scene and landed on Harry with the expression that was becoming their established communication about situations where the precise details were not for general circulation. Snape, who had arrived with the quality of someone who had already been moving before the general alarm, who had, Harry noted, come from the third-floor corridor direction rather than from the general assembly point, looked at Harry with the cool, precise attention he'd been directing at Harry since the first potions class. Severus Snape was a complicated signature. Harry had read it in the first week and returned to it several times since, looking at it the way you looked at a thing that had more layers than the surface suggested. Beneath the cold professional assessment was something that recognized Harry in a way that was prior to the present, recognition that predated this year, this school, this iteration of whatever their relationship was. The recognition people had when they'd known someone important to you before you existed. He knew Snape had known his mother. He didn't push it. But he filed it carefully. "Mr. Potter," Snape said. "An explanation." "We came to find Hermione because she hadn't been told about the troll," Harry said. "We encountered it here and contained it until you arrived." "Contained," Snape said, looking at the troll. It seemed like the appropriate response. Snape looked at him for 3 seconds with the evaluating precision of a man who was trying to determine what he was looking at. "Indeed," he said, and said nothing more, and turned to examine the troll. McGonagall gave them 5 points each for dealing with the troll. She gave them the points in the tone of someone who was technically issuing a small reward and was also communicating, clearly and without stating it, that the situation had been observed and assessed and the assessment was favorable. In the dormitory that night, Ron sat on his bed and looked at the ceiling and said, "Finally, you know, most first years don't stop trolls." "Most first years don't have a stun troll to work with," Harry said, pulling off his shoes. The stun was the important part. After that it was just geometry. "It's never just geometry," Ron said. "Stop saying things are just the easy part of them." Harry considered this. "Fair enough," he said. Hedwig landed on the bedpost and regarded the room with amber-eyed authority. "Your owl," Ron said, "also looks like she knows something the rest of us don't." "She probably does," Harry said, and turned out the light. November brought cold and Quidditch and the first match of the season, Gryffindor vs Slytherin, in the grey and gold morning air with the stands full and the enchanted commentary crackling over the crowd. Harry played Seeker with the same contained, instinctive precision he brought to everything, and found Slytherin Seeker, Terence Higgs, 4th year, experienced and competent, doing the same job from the other side with the professional focus of someone who'd earned their position. The snitch appeared at 17 minutes. Harry saw it across the pitch, near the ground at the far end, and moved. He caught it at 12 minutes and 43 seconds, which was the record for a Gryffindor first-year Seeker debut by a margin of 8 minutes, and the way he caught it, coming from height, angling in the specific trajectory that his perception of the snitch's movement pattern made obvious, reaching down at speed with the clean confidence of someone who had seen exactly how this ended before the end arrived, had the stands on their feet and Lee Jordan, the commentator, temporarily abandoning descriptive neutrality to simply say, in a very loud voice, "How?" The team celebrated in the way teams celebrated, and Harry let himself be part of it fully, because this was his team and his school and his world as much as the Sanctum and Greenwich Village, and the joy in it was real and unguarded and entirely his own. In the crowd after the match, he spotted Quirrell on the edge of the stands, and the cold patience behind the turban was watching him now with an attention that had moved from assessment to decision. He held the snitch in his closed fist, feeling its wings flutter against his palm, and looked back at the empty stands, and let himself feel the weight of what was coming. Ready, he thought. Same as always. Chapter 5, The Philosopher's Stone and What Lives Below. December came in cold and serious. The snow arrived the first week of the month and settled over Hogwarts with the conviction of snow that intended to stay, and the castle responded by becoming more itself, warmer in its corridors, the fires brighter, the ambient magic in the walls doing the thing Harry had learned to recognize as Hogwarts being deliberately hospitable. He'd had 3 conversations with the castle since October. Not in words. In the language of old magic and open perception, the way you talk to things that were aware but not verbal. Hogwarts communicated in the way mountains did if you knew how to listen, slowly, with great weight, and without anything that wasn't essential. What it had been communicating, with increasing clarity, was concern. Something in the deep structure of the castle was wrong. Not the troll, that had been external, temporary, already resolved. This was internal. Below. The third-floor corridor was the visible marker, the flag planted above the thing buried underneath it, and what lived underneath it was sick in the way that contamination was sick, spreading outward from a central point, the ancient protective magic of the castle straining against something that was pushing from beneath. Harry sat with this information for 2 weeks before doing anything about it, because acting on information before the information was complete was a way to solve the wrong problem. He used the 2 weeks well. The library contained most of what he needed once he knew what to look for. The history of the Philosopher's Stone was not hidden, it was there in the academic texts, Nicholas Flamel's work documented across 4 centuries of alchemical literature. The stone's properties were straightforward: transmutation of base metals, production of the elixir of life. What the academic texts didn't discuss directly was the stone's magical signature, which Harry could extrapolate from the theory, a concentrated, stable magical structure that had been refined over centuries into something that occupied a unique position in the spectrum between physical matter and pure magical energy. Essentially immortality compressed into a stone the size of a large marble. What the academic texts also didn't discuss was what that kind of concentrated life magic would mean to something that was the opposite of alive in every fundamental sense, a fragmented soul, torn from its body, surviving on the margins of existence through parasitic attachment to a living host. Voldemort wanted the stone the way a man dying of thirst wanted water. Not strategically. Bodily. As an immediate, existential necessity. That changed the timeline. Harry wrote a letter to Strange the second week of December and received a response the following morning, which meant Strange had been waiting for it. The response was brief: "I've been watching the dimensional disturbances at the Hogwarts location for 3 weeks. Something is going to move before the end of term. Do you need us there?" Harry wrote back, "Not yet. But keep the portal coordinates current." Strange's response to that was a single line: "They've been current since September 1st. He folded the letter and put it in his trunk and felt the particular warmth of that, not reassurance, because he wasn't uncertain, but the knowledge of being backed, which was different. Hermione figured it out on a Tuesday. Not all of it, she arrived at the shape of it from a different direction, through the library research she'd been doing since the beginning of term on the third-floor restriction and the vault in Gringotts that had been emptied in July, and the name Nicholas Flamel, which she'd been turning over since she'd found it in a footnote in a magical theory text in October. She arrived at the library table where Harry and Ron were working and set down 3 books and her notes with the decisive energy of someone who had solved something and needed to verify the solution against another mind. "The Philosopher's Stone," she said, keeping her voice low. "It's what's in the third-floor corridor. Dumbledore moved it from Gringotts in July after an attempted break-in. It's being protected by a series of enchantments from multiple professors." She sat down. "And someone is trying to steal it." "Yes," Harry said. She looked at him. "You already knew." "Since Diagon Alley," he said. "I was waiting until you got there yourself because you needed to verify it independently. you wouldn't have been comfortable acting on information you hadn't confirmed. Hermione opened her mouth, closed it, and then did something Harry found he respected. She accepted the explanation without taking offense at it. Who, she said. Who's trying to steal it? Quirrell, Harry said. He's the mechanism. But it's not really Quirrell. He told them. All of it, the fragment of soul he detected on the first night, the nature of the possession, what the stone would mean to something in Voldemort's current state. He watched their faces as he explained, Ron with the particular quality of someone receiving information that is worse than they'd expected and deciding not to flinch from it, Hermione with the rigorous focus of someone processing facts and reaching the same conclusions from the logic as Harry had reached from direct perception. What do we do? Ron said, same as always, direct and forward. We need to know the timeline, Harry said. If it moves before end of term, before the school empties out for Christmas and the corridors are quieter, we move with it. If it waits until after Christmas, we have more time to prepare. Prepare how? Hermione asked. I want to see what's down there, Harry said. Not to interfere yet. To read it. Understand the specific configuration of the protection so that when the situation develops, I know the terrain. That's the restricted corridor, Hermione said. Yes. She looked at him. He looked back at her. Ron appeared to be watching the same tennis match as always and had already decided which way it was going to go. When, Hermione said. Thursday night, Harry said. After midnight. I have something that will help with the not being seen part. He'd had the invisibility cloak since October, sent by Strange in the first letter, not the Sanctum's own concealment tools, but something that had arrived with a note that said, "This was your father's." It came with the estate. You should have it. The cloak was extraordinarily fine work, genuine invisibility rather than a concealment charm, and Harry had examined its magical structure with the interest it deserved, old, unique, with a quality in the weave that he couldn't quite classify, something that resonated faintly with all three of his power systems in a way a simple family heirloom shouldn't. He thought about that, sometimes. Didn't push it yet. Thursday came, and the three of them moved through the castle at midnight with the cloak over all of them, which was cramped and required a specific physical cooperation that involved Ron being careful about his elbows and Hermione being careful about moving in a straight line and Harry navigating, reading the castle's awareness around them. Hogwarts knew they were there, he was fairly certain, but the castle's watch and the professor's watch were different systems, and Hogwarts appeared to be making a decision to be unhelpful about their presence, the staircases staying still, the corridors staying quiet. The third-floor corridor was locked, which took Harry 6 seconds to open, the mechanism responding to a direct magical address that bypassed the locking charm entirely. The door swung inward. The room beyond was enormous and full of a smell that Harry identified before his eyes adjusted, dog. A very large dog. He extended his perception and found it immediately, 3 massive heads, 12 feet of something that existed at the intersection of magical creature and deliberate magical construction, deeply, completely asleep. That is, Ron breathed, the biggest dog I have ever seen. Fluffy, Harry said. You know its name, Hermione whispered. I know Hagrid owns it and is probably responsible for its placement here, Harry said. We're not going to bother it. He was looking at the trapdoor between the dog's paws, the thing it guarded, and extending his perception downward through the floor into what lay beneath. I need 2 minutes. He sat cross-legged on the floor, which made Ron make a small alarmed sound, and pressed his hands flat on the stone and read. Below them, a series of distinct magical zones, each one the work of a different mind, different magical tradition. He went through them in sequence, Devil's Snare first, Plant Magic, dark and clever, then something with wings, multiple somethings, fast and chaotic, then a door with a logic mechanism rather than a spell, then flames, 2 sets, contained. And at the center of it all, the stone, and around the stone a mirror. Harry spent most of his 2 minutes on the mirror. It was old. Not just the physical age, old in the way magical objects with a long and intense history of human focus were old, saturated with the weight of every person who had stood before it and wanted something. He read its mechanism and understood it immediately, because it was a function of desire and truth operating simultaneously, a mirror that showed not the present but the ideal, and had been configured so that the person who wanted the stone most desperately would see themselves using it, and would see the stone itself, but would never be able to take it, because the object the mirror showed was the object in the mirror, not the object in the world. Brilliant, Harry thought. Genuinely elegant. Dumbledore at his best, a protection that turned the enemy's greatest strength against them. Voldemort's desperate need for the stone was the exact mechanism that would keep him from it. Except. He pushed his perception slightly deeper, reading the mirror's current state, and found something Dumbledore might not have anticipated: the mirror had been used recently. Not by a wizard. By the fragment in Quirrell, the presence of Voldemort pressed against the mirror's mechanism and the mechanism had held, but it had also recorded, and in recording had weakened very slightly at one specific point. The way a lock weakens when you've tried the wrong key enough times. The mirror would hold for now. For a while. Eventually, under sustained pressure from something with enough will and enough desperation, the mechanism would find an edge. Harry took his hands off the floor, stood up, and looked at Ron and Hermione's expectant faces. "He hasn't gotten the stone yet," he said. "The mirror is holding. But it won't hold indefinitely. The attempt is getting closer." "How close?" Hermione asked. "End of term," Harry said. "When the school is going quiet and Dumbledore can be drawn away. That's the window." He looked at the sleeping Cerberus, which was producing a small earthquake of a snore. "We go back to the dormitory. We wait. When he moves, we move," Ron said. "We move," Harry confirmed. The letter came from Dumbledore 2 days before end of term. Not to Harry, to the school, a general announcement that the headmaster would be away from Hogwarts overnight on ministry business, regretfully unable to attend the end-of-term feast, the deputy headmistress would oversee in his absence. Routine. Delivered with the professional nonchalance of a man who was genuinely skilled at the misdirection of attention. Harry read the announcement on the common room board at breakfast and felt the timeline compress. He went to see McGonagall that morning. She received him in her office with a look that said she'd been expecting this, not this specifically, but him, with information, at a time that mattered. He'd established that much trust in 4 months. He told her, precisely and without dramatizing, Quirrell, the possession, the stone, the mirror, the timeline. He watched her absorb it with the controlled intensity of a woman who processed threats quickly and acted on them faster. "You should not go down there," she said, when he'd finished. "I know," he said. "But I'm going to." "Mr. Potter, the stone is secondary," Harry said. "The presence in Quirrell, if it reaches the stone, the timeline for Voldemort's return compresses dramatically. I'm not saying I'll stop it alone. I'm saying I'll be there, and if Dumbledore can be reached and redirected back to Hogwarts, the situation resolves cleanly." He held her eyes. "Please get Dumbledore back here. I'll make sure there's something to come back to." She looked at him for a long, precise moment. "How confident are you in your ability to handle what's down there?" "Very," Harry said. "Not arrogance. Assessment." She picked up her quill. "I will send a message to Albus," she said. "I am also telling you that if you go down that corridor, you are, technically, breaking school rules." "I know. I am going to pretend," she said, with great dignity, "that this conversation was about something entirely different." "That's very gracious," Harry said. "Get out of my office, Mr. Potter." He moved that night. Ron and Hermione were waiting in the common room when he came downstairs at 11, which was not entirely what he'd planned and was also exactly what he'd expected. They were dressed, wands out, wearing the expressions of people who had made a decision before he'd had the chance to make it for them. "We're coming," Hermione said, preemptively. "There's no discussion to be had," Ron said. Harry looked at them both. The warm, solid reality of them, Ron's unguarded determination, Hermione's precise, frightened courage, landed in him the way the library table and the chess games and the early morning conversations had been landing all term, accumulating into something that felt like bedrock. "Stay close," he said. "And if I tell you to move, you move immediately. No second guessing." "Agreed," Hermione said. "Yeah," Ron said. "Let's go." The invisibility cloak went over Hermione and Ron. Harry walked beside them visible, because there was no version of tonight where hiding made strategic sense. The castle was quiet, the professor's patrol cycles reading clearly to his awareness, and they moved through it with the efficiency of people who knew the building well. The third-floor corridor opened at his approach, not even needing to unlock it this time, the mechanism simply yielding, Hogwarts making a deliberate decision that registered in the stone under his feet like a door being held open. He paused and pressed one hand to the wall. The castle's awareness was urgent. Active. Not distressed, but the quality that he'd come to read as Hogwarts being as alert as it could be, the entire old intelligence of the building focused downward. "I know," he communicated back, in the language of magic and presence rather than words. "I'm going. Watch." The stone under his palm was warm. The door opened. Fluffy was already awake, all three heads oriented toward the trapdoor, hackles up, the low massive growl operating at a frequency that resonated in the chest. The trapdoor was open. Someone had already gone through. Harry looked at Fluffy, extended his perception toward the creature, and found the particular interface between a magical creature and an empathetic magical signal that he'd worked out theoretically and tested once with a mildly hostile situation in New York that neither he nor Strange had ever officially documented. He played music. Not literally, a magical resonance, a harmonic in the specific frequency that the Cerberus's magical nature was tuned to, the same principle as the physical music that could send it to sleep but operated directly at the level of the magic rather than requiring an instrument. The three heads turned toward him slowly, eyes going soft, and the growl subsided, and all three of them lay down with the cooperative inevitability of something that had been told to rest and found the instruction impossible to refuse. "Did you just," Hermione started. "Trapdoor," Harry said. He dropped through first. The drop was 20 feet into soft earth, and he landed in a controlled crouch that absorbed it cleanly, and above him he heard the soft thuds of Ron and Hermione following, guided by the slowing charm he'd cast on the way down. The devil's snare was already reaching for them when they landed. Harry put his hand out, palm flat, and pushed warmth and light through it, not a flame spell, something more fundamental, the growth magic that lived in plant matter responding to his chaos energy the way everything living responded to chaos energy when it was offered as nourishment rather than threat. The devil's snare recoiled, not in pain, more like a hand pulling back from unexpected heat, and cleared a path that held. Ron looked at the retreating vines. "Every time," he said. "Every single time." "Don't," Hermione said, with the tone of someone filing an observation for later. The winged keys chamber was full of movement, hundreds of enchanted keys circling at all heights, and a door across the room with a distinctive keyhole, and broomsticks along the wall. Harry looked at the door, at the key pattern in the lock, and extended his perception through the room to find the specific key currently circling that matched the lock's mechanism. The right key was obvious once you read it, magical resonance matching magical resonance, the way instruments in tune recognized each other. He pointed at it, sent a precise accio in its specific direction, and it flew to his hand, wings beating with indignant surprise. He unlocked the door before Ron had finished getting a broom off the wall. Ron looked at the broom in his hand. Then at Harry. Then at the open door. "Right," he said, and put the broom back. The troll chamber, the troll was already unconscious, which meant Quirrell had dealt with it himself before them, and the quality of the working that had done it carried the cold, absolute efficiency of something that didn't bother with precision when force was available. Harry noted it and moved on. The flame barriers were the work of two professors. He recognized Snape's precise, contained style in the black flames at the back, and someone else's work in the purple at the front. The logic puzzle on the table was Hermione's territory, and she solved it in 4 minutes with the focused efficiency of someone who had been doing logic puzzles since she was 5 and found them satisfying rather than taxing, and the quality of her focus, the absolute commitment to the problem in front of her while standing in the middle of an active crisis, was one of the things Harry had come to genuinely admire. "One bottle gets through the black flame," she said, the logic complete, checking twice. "One gets you back. This one," holding up a small round bottle, "for forward." "I go alone from here," Harry said. "Harry, the logic puzzle gave us 2 doses," he said. "You and Ron go back. Get out of the castle, get to a safe distance. If I'm not back in 2 hours," he looked at both of them steadily, "Strange will already know. He's been watching." He pressed the second bottle into Hermione's hand. "Trust me." Hermione looked at him with the expression she had when she was deciding between arguing and trusting, and chose trusting with the deliberateness of a person who didn't give it easily and meant it entirely. 2 hours, she said. 2 hours, Harry said. Ron met his eyes with the direct, uncomplicated quality of a person who communicated trust through eye contact rather than words. Then he grabbed Harry's arm briefly, once, tight, and let go. Harry walked through the black flame. The final chamber was large and dim, lit by the mirror's own faint luminescence, that old light, deep and internal, reflecting something that existed in the space between what was and what was wanted. The stone was in the mirror. Harry knew that immediately. Quirrell was standing before it with his back to the door, perfectly still, and the quality of his stillness was wrong in a way that went beyond the situation, not the stillness of concentration but the stillness of something that had stopped performing the ordinary movements of the person it was wearing. "I wondered if you would follow," Quirrell said, and the voice was his but the quality wasn't, cleaner than Quirrell's stutter, a cadence that belonged to a different architecture of thought. "I felt you in the castle. I have felt you since September." "I know," Harry said. He stepped fully into the room and let the door close behind him. He didn't draw his wand. He stood in the open space between the door and the mirror with his hands loose at his sides and his 3 power systems present and unhidden, the way he told the castle who he was, not performing, just being what he was without apology. Quirrell turned. His face was slack with the absence of a person fully present in it, and on the back of his head, visible now through the turban that had come partially unwound, the white wrapping loose, there were features. The outline of a face pressed into the back of the skull like something pushing from inside, and the eyes were red, and the quality of what lived in them was a hatred so cold and so old that it was almost impersonal. Almost. But not quite. Because those red eyes found Harry's face, and something moved in them that was entirely personal. "Harry Potter," the voice said, from both the face Harry could see and the one he couldn't, overlapping in a register that was cold and intimate simultaneously. "You are not what I expected." "That seems to be the consensus," Harry said. "What I expected was a child raised in ignorance, stumbling through this castle on borrowed luck and a famous name." The head tilted, Quirrell's head, but the gesture wasn't Quirrell's. "Instead I find someone who has been watching me since the first night. Who knows what I am?" A pause. "Who is what you are?" "You recognize the chaos magic," Harry said. "I recognize the signature of a soul that has been touched by something fundamental. By an absolute moment." The red eyes moved over him with the assessing attention of something that had spent decades reducing everything to its essential components. "Your mother's sacrifice. My curse redirected into me. And what came after, what poured into the fracture." The voice was thoughtful now, the hatred still present but currently serving as a foundation rather than a surface. "You are the result of my greatest failure and something else entirely. That is, not what I planned for." "No," Harry said. "I imagine not." "You could stand aside," the voice said, and there was nothing in it that suggested a genuine offer, it was the kind of statement made not to persuade but to read the response. "You have no stake in this stone beyond the one others have assigned you. You are not Dumbledore's piece. You said as much to him in the alley." "I heard about that, did you?" "I hear many things." Quirrell is a useful instrument. A pause. You are not a piece. I can see that. The question is what you are instead. Harry looked at Voldemort, not at Quirrell, but at the face on the back of the head, the thing that had been the most dangerous wizard in a century and was currently surviving in the way that only a will entirely committed to its own continuation could survive. He felt it clearly, the intelligence, the absolute conviction, the philosophical certainty that power was the only truth and that the only crime was dying before you'd accumulated enough of it to be permanent. He also felt the thing that the darkness in his scar felt. The resonance between them, two magical structures that had been in contact on the most fundamental level, on the night that had made both of them what they were. What am I instead? Harry said. I'm someone who's here to make sure you don't get the stone tonight. Quirrell's hand came up, and the spell that came from it was the killing curse, not hesitant, not preceded by conversation, just the green light and the cold absolute intent, and it arrived with the total commitment of something that had done this thousands of times. Harry stepped sideways. Not teleportation, not quite, but a sorcerous displacement, a 3-foot lateral movement through a folded slice of space that took him from the curse's path to a position 4 feet to the left before the light reached where he'd been standing. The curse hit the wall and the stone scorched and the room shook slightly with the impact. Quirrell turned, recalibrating, and Harry was already moving, forward and fast, because distance was not strategic against something that could throw killing curses and that his protective magic couldn't block in the conventional sense but that also couldn't touch him if he didn't allow the contact. The chaos energy came out. Not uncontrolled, not the accident of age 6, not the eruption that redrew the windows. This was the first time Harry had let his magic be fully, openly, deliberately itself in a combat situation, and the difference was everything Strange had described and nothing Strange could have prepared him for, it was complete. All 3 systems operating not in sequence but simultaneously, unified in a single expression of will and intent that produced something he didn't have a name for yet. The chaos energy filled the room in a wave of deep red that was also gold at the edges, the phoenix resonance, his mother's love working present in the magic the way it was always present, the foundational note everything else built on. His sorcerous perception expanded to cover the entire chamber in real time. His native wizarding magic poured through the holly wand he'd drawn without noticing, feeding the specific channel of British magical tradition into the broader current. The mirror pulsed. The stone appeared. Not in the mirror, in Harry's pocket, which he noticed with one layer of awareness and filed for later, because the mirror had read him and made a determination and done what it was designed to do, placed the stone in the hands of the person who wanted it only to protect it. Quirrell hit him with the full force of Voldemort's displaced power, a working that was not any standard curse but something older, a will exertion, Voldemort's consciousness pressing directly against Harry's, trying to find purchase, trying to push through the chaos energy and reach the wizarding magic beneath and use it, the way a lockpick tries different angles. Harry felt it arrive, and held. The chaos energy pushed back. The contact between them was enormous. Not physically. The physical dimension of the fight was a 30-foot room with a man in it who kept trying to curse him and kept missing. But the contact between Harry's magical core and the fragment of Voldemort's soul was the collision of 2 things that had been shaped by the same moment, and the resonance was so powerful that the room went white for a second and the mirror cracked down the middle and the stone floor split in a 2-inch seam from wall to wall. Harry pressed his hand against Quirrell's wrist to stop the next curse at the source. The contact burned. Not him. Quirrell. He'd read in the library about why, Lily Potter's sacrifice, the love-working, the protection that had lived in his skin since infancy. Touch transferred it. He hadn't been certain it still worked, 10 years later, having been shaped by everything that had happened since, but the way Quirrell's skin blistered and smoked at the contact was unambiguous confirmation. Quirrell screamed. Harry held on. Not because he was cruel, because the fragment in Quirrell was using that moment of pain to try to evacuate, to separate itself from the host and find another vector, and Harry could feel the direction it was trying to move, could read the path it wanted, and closed it. Not with violence. With the specific working he'd spent 2 weeks designing once he understood what he was dealing with, a containment that used the love-working's own resonance as a wall, that the fragment of Voldemort couldn't pass through because the thing it was built from, hatred, the absolute negation of love, was the exact frequency the wall was designed to reject. Voldemort tried 3 other paths in fast succession. Harry closed each one. Then Voldemort did something Harry hadn't calculated for, he abandoned Quirrell entirely. The evacuation was fast and total, the fragment ripping free of the host with the brutal efficiency of something choosing survival over attachment, and Quirrell collapsed, not unconscious, worse, and the dark energy screamed through the room as a formless presence, searching for a new host, circling Harry, looking for the gap. There was no gap. Harry stood in the chamber with his magic fully present, all 3 systems operating in open unison, and the containment working around him was complete, not a bubble, not a shield, but a field of living magic that had no frequency Voldemort's fragment could align with. The love working in Harry's scar was active and warm, responding to the threat, and the chaos energy used it as a carrier, extending it outward into the room, and the dark presence hit that field from 3 different directions and each time found nothing to grip. It hovered in the center of the room, formless, diminished, and Harry felt the exact quality of its state with the clarity of their prior contact. It was still thinking. Still, right now, in this moment of apparent defeat, working the problem. You understand, it said, using the air of the room as a medium, which required a significant amount of remaining power and told Harry something about its current state, that this changes nothing. It changes the specific timeline, Harry said. You don't get the stone tonight. I don't need the stone tonight. I need time. The voice was quieter now, the authority in it the authority of long planning rather than immediate power. And time I have. I have always been better at time than my enemies understood. I know, Harry said. I've read your history. A silence. The dark presence circled once more, reading him with the cold precision it brought to everything. What you are, it said finally, should not be possible. So I've been told. And yet here you are. The presence pulled toward the crack in the floor where the stone had split, finding the line of weakness, Harry noted, the way intelligence found the line of weakness in anything, and began to dissipate through it, following some path Harry couldn't fully track, thin and deliberate and diminishing. We will meet again, Harry Potter. When I am more than this, I'll be here, Harry said. The presence was gone. The room was quiet. Quirrell was on the floor, breathing but barely, the host body catastrophically damaged by the forced evacuation of its passenger, and Harry knelt beside him and assessed what he was looking at with the clear-eyed practicality of someone who had done field medical triage under Strange's instructions since he was 9. The damage was extensive and internal, the kind of harm that required more than he could provide here. He reached into his pocket and closed his hand around the stone. It was warm. Heavier than it looked, which made sense. Something that had been worked with that much focused intention for that many decades compressed a significant amount of magical energy into a small space, and the density was almost physical. He looked at it for a moment, small and red in his palm, and thought about everything it represented and everything Voldemort would do to obtain it and the simple, clean logic of what needed to happen next. He put it in his pocket. Then he sat on the cracked stone floor and looked at the broken mirror and Quirrell's still form and the scorched walls, and let himself be still for a moment. The exhaustion arrived in a slow wave, not from the fight, which had taken less than 12 minutes and whose physical demands had been well within his capacity, but from the quality of the contact with Voldemort's fragment, the particular kind of drainage that happened when you held something that wanted very badly to be somewhere else and didn't let it go. He'd been holding it from September, in a sense. The low-level awareness, the watching, the patient containment of a situation that wanted to move faster than its conditions allowed. 11 years of preparation, and then 4 months of active navigation, and then 12 minutes of being precisely and fully what he was. He thought about Strange drinking tea in the library. About Wanda pressing 2 fingers to his sternum and saying you know where it lives. About Wong teaching him to lose at chess. About an owl that had been waiting for the right moment and a cloak that chose him and a castle that had known him from the first night and held him carefully ever since. He put his hand on the stone floor. The castle responded immediately, the way it always did now, warm, attentive, the old magic present and certain. "Done," he said, in the language below words. The castle held him for a moment, the way old things held people who needed it, with the uncomplicated solidity of something that had been here before them and intended to remain after. Then Dumbledore arrived. The headmaster came through the door with the urgency of someone who had been redirected from his journey and had moved very fast and had been running calculations of his own, and the expression on his face when he took in the chamber, Quirrell on the floor, the broken mirror, the cracked stone, Harry sitting in the middle of it all with his back straight and his magic calm, was the expression of a man receiving a significant revision of a very old understanding. He looked at Harry for a long moment. Harry stood up, reached into his pocket, and held out the stone. Dumbledore looked at it. Then at Harry. His eyes, blue and sharp behind the half-moon spectacles, moved over Harry's face with the particular attention of a man who was learning something he should have learned earlier and was honest enough to know it. "Are you hurt?" he said, and the first thing he said was that, which Harry noted and respected. "No," Harry said. "Quirrell needs immediate help." The fragment evacuated the host forcibly. "The internal damage is significant." Dumbledore moved to Quirrell without another word, wand already out. Harry watched him work, precise, experienced, the best medical magic Harry had seen outside of Strange, which was a genuine compliment, and waited. After a minute, Dumbledore looked up. "He'll survive," he said. "The Ministry will need to be involved." "Yes," Harry said. Dumbledore stood, and looked at the stone in Harry's outstretched hand. "You could have put that in your pocket and kept walking," he said. "I could have," Harry agreed. "You didn't." "It's not mine," Harry said. "It belongs to Nicholas Flamel. He should have it back, and then someone should have a serious conversation with him about destruction timelines that don't require a physical object that dangerous to remain in the world." He met Dumbledore's eyes. "But that's your conversation to have." Dumbledore took the stone. He held it briefly, and something moved in his expression that Harry read as the complicated combination of relief and grief that belonged to a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and was being asked to carry it differently. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For what specifically?" Harry said. "For the version of you I was prepared for," Dumbledore said. "I built a plan around a child I imagined, frightened, uninformed, in need of direction. I prepared a path." He paused. "The path was designed for someone who needed it. You didn't." "No," Harry said. "But I understand why you built it." "That is," Dumbledore said, "rather generous. You love this school and the people in it," Harry said. "Everything you built was toward protecting them. That's not a thing I'd dismiss." He looked at the broken mirror. "The methods need updating. Some of the principles are sound." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. In the silence, the chamber's old magic settled around them both, Hogwarts, attentive and present, holding the space the way it had held it all night. "You are nothing like your father," Dumbledore said. "And very much like your mother. In the ways that matter most." Harry felt that land, in the specific way things landed when they touched the part of his magical core that his mother's sacrifice had shaped. He didn't perform a response to it. He let it be true. "Can you get Quirrell out of here?" he said. "Yes," Dumbledore said, and bent to the task. Harry picked up his wand from where he'd dropped it, and looked at the room one final time, the cracked floor, the broken mirror, the scorched walls, and thought about what Strange had said once, during a training session when a particularly difficult working had made a mess of the practice room. The mark of good work isn't that nothing breaks. It's that the right things do. The right things, here, had broken. He walked out. Chapter 6, The world learns his name. The hospital wing smelled of dittany and clean linen, and Madame Pomfrey ran it with the organized authority of someone who had seen enough magical injuries to be unsurprisable and was therefore surprised by Harry twice in the first 10 minutes. The first surprise was that he didn't need treatment. She examined him with the thoroughness of someone who didn't take a person's word for their own medical state, running diagnostic charms that mapped his magical and physical condition with the precision of instruments that didn't have preferences, and found nothing that required intervention. What she found instead made her pause and run the diagnostic a second time and then set down her wand with the particular care of someone placing something delicate. "Your magical core," she said, in the tone of a medical professional selecting words carefully, "is unlike anything in my diagnostic reference." "I know," Harry said. "The three distinct systems operating in concurrent integration," Harry said. "Yes. It's been that way since I was an infant. It's stable." She looked at her diagnostic results, then at him, and made a decision. "You're physically unharmed," she said. "Your magical reserves are lower than baseline but recovering. You should sleep. I need to check on my friends first." The second surprise was Ron and Hermione, who arrived at the hospital wing 40 minutes after Harry, which meant they'd made it out of the castle, gone to a safe distance, waited the agreed 2 hours minus 20 minutes, and come back, not because they doubted him, Harry understood, but because waiting was harder than moving and they were people who moved. Hermione arrived talking. She had questions, not frightened questions, the rigorous analytical kind, the kind she asked when something had happened that she needed to fully understand before she could file it correctly. Harry answered all of them, sitting on the edge of a hospital bed while Madame Pomfrey pretended not to listen from across the room. Ron arrived asking a single question: "He's gone?" "For now," Harry said. "For now," Ron repeated, and sat down on the bed next to Harry's with the settling weight of someone who has taken a large thing on board and is deciding how to carry it. "Right." He picked at a thread on the blanket. "How are you?" "Fine," Harry said. Ron looked at him with the direct, unfussy attention he used when he was assessing something important. "Actually fine, or fine like you're going to deal with it later?" Harry considered being evasive and decided against it, because Ron was asking specifically and deserved specifically. "Both, probably," he said. "I'm fine right now. There's a lot to process later." "Yeah," Ron said. "Okay." He nodded once, accepting this. "I'll be around for the processing part." "I know," Harry said, and meant it in the way he meant things that were foundational. Hermione had run out of immediate questions and was sitting in the chair between their beds with her notes. She'd been taking notes, Harry realized, probably from the moment they got outside, and the fact of this was so perfectly and completely Hermione that he felt a sudden, warm, uncomplicated affection for her that had nothing to do with strategy or utility and everything to do with the specific way she was exactly herself at all times. "What happens now?" she said. "Dumbledore handles the official version," Harry said. "Quirrell is in ministry custody by morning. The stone is returned to Flammel. The story that goes out to the school is probably something about a security incident and an unwell professor." He paused. "Voldemort's survival is not general knowledge. Dumbledore will choose how to handle that. Do you agree with how he'll handle it?" Hermione asked, with the precision of someone who had already noted that Harry's judgment and Dumbledore's didn't always align. "Not entirely," Harry said. "But it's his call on this one. The information about Voldemort's survival needs context to be useful rather than just terrifying, and right now most of the wizarding world doesn't have the context. I'll push on that timeline eventually." He looked at his hands. "Not tonight." Hermione wrote something down. Ron looked at the ceiling. Madame Pomfrey moved quietly at the far end of the room, the sound of her work the comfortable background of a space designed for recovery. "He called you by your name," Hermione said, after a moment. "Voldemort. In the chamber." "Yes. What was that like?" Harry thought about it, giving the question the honest engagement it deserved. "Like being read," he said. "He's extraordinarily intelligent. Whatever he is, whatever you think of everything he's done, the mind is exceptional. He looked at me and understood what I was faster than almost anyone has." He paused. "It's strange, being accurately seen by something that wants to destroy you. Doesn't that make him more frightening?" Hermione said. It makes him more interesting, Harry said. And more dangerous. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. He looked up at the ceiling, following Ron's gaze. He said we'd meet again. Will you be ready? Ron said. I'll be more ready, Harry said. That's the best answer I can give. Ron nodded, and the nod had in it the uncomplicated acceptance of someone who respected honest answers over reassuring ones. They stayed in the hospital wing until Madame Pomfrey suggested, with the professional firmness of someone accustomed to winning this argument, that all three of them could benefit from actual sleep in actual beds and would be more useful to the world in the morning than they currently were at 2 in the morning, and Harry didn't disagree with the logic, and they went. Dumbledore came to see Harry the following afternoon. Harry was in the hospital wing at the headmaster's request, not for medical reasons, those being resolved, but for the conversation that both of them understood needed to happen, the one that the chamber had made necessary and that the end of term made urgent. Dumbledore arrived with 2 cups of tea that he produced from apparently nowhere, set one beside Harry's bed, and sat in the chair with the unhurried quality of a man who had decided not to pretend the situation was ordinary. Quirrell is alive, Dumbledore said, first, because Harry's eyes asked it before his mouth did. He's in St. Mungo's. The prognosis is cautious but not without hope. His mind, a pause, and something moved in Dumbledore's expression that was genuine sorrow. The damage from a prolonged possession is significant. He will recover his body. The rest is less certain. Harry held the tea without drinking it. He was a person before any of this, he said. Yes, Dumbledore said. He was. He settled in the chair, looking at Harry with the blue eyes that were, Harry thought, doing something genuinely different from every prior interaction. They were not planning. They were simply present. I would like to talk to you honestly, if you're willing. I've been willing since Diagon Alley, Harry said. Dumbledore accepted that with a nod that acknowledged what it was. I have spent, he said, the better part of a decade planning for the moment that you would arrive in the wizarding world. I had a precise picture of who you would be, what you would need, how you could be prepared. The plan was, he paused, and the pause was genuine, a man being accurate rather than modest. The plan was thorough. It was not built for ignorance of who you were. It was built for a version of you that was manageable. Managed, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore said, without flinching from it. Managed. Guided, I told myself. Directed. Prepared for a purpose in the way that I prepared pieces for purposes my whole professional life, because the purpose was real and the stakes were real and I had learned, at great cost, what happened when pieces were not properly prepared. His voice was level and the truth in it was old. I told myself it was care. I believe it was. But it was also control. Harry listened to this with the full attention he gave to things that mattered. The version of you I built the plan for, Dumbledore continued, would have arrived at Hogwarts frightened and uninformed and in need of guidance, with power he didn't understand and grief he hadn't processed and a name that felt like a weight. I would have been the one to give him context. Purpose. The sense that his suffering had meaning. He looked at his own hands. I would have, eventually, told him what I believe the prophecy requires. And I would have expected him to accept it. Because you'd built the acceptance into him, Harry said. Yes. The hospital wing was quiet. Sun moved through the windows at the afternoon angle, falling in warm bars across the floor, and in the distance the sounds of the school going about its pre-departure business carried faintly, students packing, conversations in corridors, the particular noise of a year ending. What does the prophecy actually say? Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him with the question in the blue eyes, are you sure you want this now? Harry held his gaze and the question answered itself. Dumbledore recited it, the full text, without inflection or editorial, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born as the 7th month dies. Harry listened, and when it was done sat with it for a moment, turning it over in the way he turned over problems that required his actual attention. Born as the 7th month dies, he said. July 31st. Yes. And Voldemort marked me as his equal, Harry said. By trying to kill me. By choosing me. Yes. So the power I have to vanquish him, Harry looked at Dumbledore steadily. The prophecy doesn't specify what the power is. No, Dumbledore said. It does not. And it doesn't say how, or when, or whether I survive it. No. The word carried weight. A man being honest about a thing he'd been thinking around for years. Harry thought about this, and about Voldemort in the chamber saying we will meet again, and about the long-game quality of that voice, the absolute patience of something that had decided its own death was a temporary inconvenience. He'll come back, Harry said. I believe so. Yes. Stronger than last night, if he's given time. That is, Dumbledore said, my concern. Yes. Then the plan, Harry said, needs to be different from the one you had. He met Dumbledore's eyes directly. Not because your goals are wrong. Your goals are, largely, mine as well. Protect the school, protect the people in it, stop Voldemort before he kills any more of them. Those are my goals too. He paused. But the method has to change. You don't get to manage me. You don't get to build toward a version of this where I die for the cause without knowing I'm going to die. If the prophecy requires something from me, I get to know about it fully and decide what I do with that information. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. That is, he said, finally, entirely reasonable. And I am, he stopped. Tried again. I am not accustomed to being told this in this way. By a first-year student. Whom I outclass in years and in certain aspects of experience by a considerable margin. He paused. I am also not accustomed to being told something entirely reasonable in this way and having no cogent objection. You have cogent objections, Harry said. You have several. You're choosing not to use them. Dumbledore looked at him, and the expression was something Harry hadn't seen on the headmaster before, stripped of the strategic warmth, the managed presentation, down to something older and less performed. It was the face of a man who was tired in the specific way of people who have been very intelligent for a very long time and have occasionally, in the service of intelligence, done things they weren't proud of. You are remarkably like Lily, Dumbledore said, very quietly. Not in the obvious ways. In the way that mattered most about her. She saw through things. Not aggressively, she simply could not see them, and she was always honest about what she saw. His eyes were distant for a moment. I was, I think, somewhat afraid of that quality in her. I am finding it no less affecting in you. Harry didn't look away from that. He let it be said and let it matter. I want to work with you, he said. Not for you. With you. That means information flows both directions and neither of us pretends we don't know what we know. And your guardians? Dumbledore asked. Are the best positioned people in the world to help with what's coming, Harry said. That's not negotiable. But it's also not adversarial. If you'll stop treating them as obstacles to your plan and start treating them as allies, you'll find they're exceptional ones. Dumbledore considered this with the genuine engagement of a man revising a framework. Dr. Strange, he said carefully, operates in a tradition that is, not always aligned with the wizarding world's priorities. He operates in a tradition that is bigger than the wizarding world's priorities, Harry said, and said it without apology. That's not the same as misaligned. Bigger contains aligned. A long pause. Dumbledore picked up his tea, drank from it, set it down. I would like, he said, to meet with him. And with Ms. Maximoff. Formally, with proper introductions, without the adversarial quality of the last 10 years of correspondence. I'll tell them, Harry said. They'll come. Dumbledore nodded. He stood from the chair with the slow deliberateness of someone who has sat in one position for too long, which was perhaps also true in a less literal sense. He picked up Harry's untouched tea and set it closer to him. Drink it, he said, with the warmth that was genuine in him, that Harry had never doubted was genuine. You did something extraordinary last night. It is appropriate to rest afterward. I'll rest on the train, Harry said. Dumbledore smiled, the real one, small and self-aware. Of course you will, he said. Good night, Harry. He moved to the door and stopped with his hand on the frame. Your parents would have been, he paused and chose the word carefully. Staggered, he said. Enormously and completely staggered. He left. Harry drank his tea. The news moved through Hogwarts the way news moved through places where people lived in close proximity and had active magical means of communication, fast, fragmentary, and significantly wrong in most of its details. The official version that Dumbledore released was precise and minimal. Professor Quirrell had suffered a breakdown related to a serious magical illness and had been removed to appropriate care. The third-floor corridor was no longer restricted, the school was safe. This version was insufficient for anyone paying attention and entirely adequate for the majority of the student body, who received it with the mix of vague excitement and complete absence of actionable information that official versions were designed to produce. What filtered through unofficially was a different matter entirely. Harry became aware of the unofficial version on the morning of the last day of term, when the quality of attention in the Great Hall shifted in the specific way it shifted when a large number of people had been discussing the same subject and were now adjusting their behavior in the presence of the subject of that discussion. The lightning bolt scar was not a secret. It had never been a secret, it was there, it was famous, everyone knew what it meant in broad cultural terms. What was different now was that people were looking at him with a calculation that hadn't been present before, a reassessment happening in real time, the image of Harry Potter that they'd been building since September being revised against new data. He ate his breakfast and ignored it with the ease of someone who had been observed and assessed his entire life and had long since decided that how people looked at him was not his responsibility to manage. Draco Malfoy, however, sat down across from him at the Gryffindor table, which was a thing that did not happen, which meant Malfoy had decided something specific and was executing it. Harry and Malfoy's relationship had settled, over the term, into something that was neither friendship nor active hostility but a mutual recognition of intelligence that neither of them would have articulated as respect and which functioned like it anyway. Malfoy was, Harry had concluded early, a person whose worst qualities had been carefully cultivated by his upbringing and whose actual mind was considerably more interesting than his performance of his upbringing suggested. He was arrogant in the way of someone who had been told he was exceptional before he had the experience to evaluate the claim. He was also, occasionally, when the performance slipped, genuinely perceptive. You stopped him, Malfoy said, with the directness he used when he decided to drop the performance, which Harry had noticed happened in private or near-private situations and never in public. Quirrell. Whatever Quirrell was. Quirrell needed help, Harry said. I helped with the situation. Don't, Malfoy said. The diplomatic version. I'm not interested in that. He leaned forward slightly, and the gray eyes were doing the reading thing, the real assessment. My father has been preparing for, he stopped. Started again, more carefully. There are people who have been preparing for a specific future. One that looks a certain way. What happened last night makes that future look different. Your father supports Voldemort, Harry said, flatly and without drama. Malfoy's jaw tightened. Former supporters, he said, with the precision of someone choosing words to carry legal weight. The war ended. People made accommodations. And now they're watching to see which way the wind blows, Harry said. Yes, Malfoy said. And the wind, he stopped again, and this time the hesitation was the hesitation of someone standing at a decision point, the particular quality of a person who has gone as far as they prepared to go and is choosing whether to take the next step. You're not what anyone expected, he said. What you are, what you apparently are, changes the calculation. For your father. For a lot of people. He stood, and the performance was coming back on as he did, the public Malfoy reassembling like a costume. I'm not declaring anything, he said. I'm observing. I know, Harry said. I'm observing too. Malfoy left. Ron, who had arrived with his plate during the tail end of this exchange, sat down and looked at the retreating Slytherin with an expression that Harry read as complicated. "What was that?" Ron said. "A boy figuring out who he wants to be," Harry said. "It'll take a while." "Is he going to be a problem?" "I don't know yet," Harry said. "Possibly the opposite. People in that position, with access to that world, with that kind of intelligence, could be useful in ways that matter." He picked up his pumpkin juice. "Or not. We watch." "You say, we watch a lot," Ron observed. "Because watching is almost always more useful than acting before you have the information," Harry said. Ron considered this. "Strange taught you that?" He reinforced it. "Wong built the habit. Wanda taught me when to stop watching." "When's that?" Harry looked at him. "When someone's already in the air and heading for the ground." Ron pointed at him with his fork. "The Quidditch catch." "The Quidditch catch," Harry confirmed. Snape found him in the corridor after lunch, which had the quality of a meeting that had been engineered to appear accidental and was worth engaging with honestly on that basis. Severe as Snape was, Harry had concluded over the course of the term, one of the more complex people in the building, which was saying something in a building that contained Dumbledore. The cold precision and the particular brand of targeted cruelty he deployed in potions were real and not dismissed, they were also not the whole picture, not by a long way. The loyalty in him was fierce and buried and had the quality of something that had been tested severely and held. He was a man who had made a terrible choice early and spent decades paying for it in ways that had shaped him into something that was neither the choice nor its opposite but a third thing, harder and stranger and more interesting than either. He was also, and this was the thing Harry had been thinking about since September, the person in this building who had loved Lily Potter. "Mr. Potter," Snape said, falling into step beside him with the casual precision of someone who had done exactly this. "A word." "Of course, Professor." They walked for a moment in silence, which Snape appeared to be using to organize something. Harry waited. "What happened in that chamber," Snape said finally, "will not remain contained as a school incident. The Ministry will investigate Quirrell. What they find will produce questions. Those questions will eventually reach a public stage." He paused. "Your name will be at the center of that stage." "I know." "The wizarding world," Snape said, with the precise neutrality of a man who had strong opinions about the wizarding world and was currently choosing not to deploy them, "has spent 10 years with a version of you that it constructed in your absence. The boy who lived. The infant who defeated the Dark Lord. A symbol." He glanced at Harry sideways. "You are not a symbol." "No," Harry agreed. "What you are is considerably more difficult to manage than a symbol," Snape said. "A symbol can be directed. Celebrated selectively. Used in service of narratives that institutions find convenient." He was quiet for a moment. "A person with actual power who makes actual decisions and is not susceptible to management is a different category of challenge." "You're warning me," Harry said. "I'm informing you," Snape said. "The distinction matters." He stopped walking, and Harry stopped with him, and they stood in the corridor while students moved around them with the particular trajectory adjustments of people who sensed they were in proximity to something they shouldn't interrupt. "The Ministry will want to claim credit for what you represent. The Prophet will want to tell your story in a way that serves its readership. Dumbledore will want," a pause, loaded with the specific quality of someone who had precise opinions about Dumbledore and was editing in real time. "Dumbledore will want what he has always wanted, which is for things to align with the greater good as he defines it." "And what do you want?" Harry said. Snape looked at him, and the expression was stripped of the professional cold for a moment, just briefly, and underneath it was the thing Harry had been reading all term, the recognition, the prior, the connection that predated both of them in this current configuration. "I want," Snape said carefully, "for Lily Potter's son to survive. Not as a function of a prophecy or a plan. Simply to survive." He paused. "That is an interest distinct from every other interest in your vicinity, and I am making you aware of it." Harry looked at him directly. You loved her, he said. Snape's expression did something complex and rapid that Harry let pass without pressing. That is, Snape said, not a subject for a school corridor. No, Harry agreed. Not today. A beat. Snape looked at him with the assessing precision that Harry had learned to read as its own kind of engagement, the attention Snape gave to things he took seriously, without the cold that coated it in public. Your potions work this term, Snape said, in the return to professional footing that was its own form of communication, has been above the curriculum standard. The theoretical annotations in your practical work are at a post-Newt level and are occasionally wrong in interesting ways that suggest a foundational theoretical gap specific to magical chemistry as distinct from magical theory. The gap is real, Harry said. My chemistry knowledge is primarily sorcerous and chaos-based. British potion-making chemistry has specific principles that don't map directly. There are texts, Snape said. Not in the school library. In the private collection. I will leave a reading list in the potions classroom. Harry looked at him. Thank you, Professor. Don't, Snape said, with the precise quality of someone deflecting something they didn't know how to receive, make it significant. He walked away. Harry watched him go and thought about all the complicated ways that grief could love a person even after the person was gone, and how the love didn't always look like anything recognizable from the outside, and how it mattered anyway. The Hogwarts Express left at 11 on the morning of the last day of term, and Harry sat in a compartment with Ron and Hermione and watched the castle diminish through the window as the train moved south through the white landscape of a Scottish winter. Hogwarts remained visible longer than the distance should have allowed, its towers clear against the grey sky, and Harry thought it was probably the castle doing that deliberately, and felt a warmth that was his mother's magic and his own feeling operating from the same origin point. Ron had brought chess. Hermione had brought 3 books. Neville Longbottom knocked and asked, with the careful hopefulness of someone who had decided to try something that felt risky, if he could join them, and Harry said yes, and Neville sat down with the quality of someone who had been waiting a long time for something and was slightly afraid to fully arrive. They played chess and read and talked about nothing important for an hour, which was its own kind of necessary, the decompression that followed intensity, the returning to ordinary life that confirmed ordinary life was still there and worth returning to. Then Hermione set down her book and looked at Harry with the expression she had for direct questions she'd been holding on to. When we get back, she said. School aside. What's the actual plan? For Voldemort. For everything that comes after this. Ron looked up from the chessboard. Neville went still in the way he went still when serious conversation started, deciding whether to participate or recede, and Harry looked at him specifically and included him in the answer with the directness of someone who had decided Neville was in the circle. The actual plan, Harry said, is to not have a plan that extends more than one move ahead of the current situation, because plans that extend further than that stop being plans and start being narratives, and narratives make you miss what's actually happening. Hermione looked like she wanted to argue with this philosophically and was restraining herself. That's a principle, not a plan. It's the correct principle, which is more useful than an incorrect plan, Harry said. What I know, Voldemort will reconstitute. He needs a body, he'll find a method, given time. He has loyal followers who believe he isn't gone. He's more intelligent than his reputation gives him credit for, because his reputation was built by people who defeated him when he made a fundamental error, and he doesn't make the same error twice. He looked out the window at the snow-covered countryside moving past. He'll take a different approach this time. Not the same overt power play. Something subtler, building a foundation before the visible move. How long? Ron asked. I don't know. Years, possibly. Long enough to do something we won't be able to undo if we're not paying attention. Harry looked back at them. So we pay attention. We learn everything we can, not just the things on the curriculum, everything. Magical history, magical theory, the political structure of the wizarding world, who holds what kind of power and why and what they do to keep it. He paused. And we keep our relationships with the people who matter. Like us, Ron said, not as a question. Like you, Harry said. And Neville's expression did something that Harry thought probably mirrored what he'd looked like the first time Wanda had treated something he could do as ordinary and wonderful simultaneously. And Dumbledore, on the new terms. And Snape, in his way. He looked at Hermione. And the people outside this world. Strange and Wanda, Hermione said. Yes. She was quiet for a moment, thinking about this with the thoroughness she brought to everything. You trust them completely, she said. Strange and Wanda. Not because you have to. You actually trust them. Yes, Harry said. They chose me when they didn't have to. They taught me to be what I am rather than something more manageable. They've never once, in 11 years, treated my power as a problem to be solved or a resource to be used. He looked at his hands. That's not nothing. That's everything, actually. Neville was looking at Harry with an expression that was difficult to read exactly but that Harry thought was the expression of someone recognizing something they'd been wanting and hadn't had words for. Do you think that's something a person can get from regular people, he said, carefully. Or is it specific to having magical foster parents who are objectively extraordinary? Harry said. No. I think it's specific to people who decide to see you clearly and love what they see. He held Neville's eyes. I think you can find that with ordinary people in ordinary ways. It's probably harder. But it's the same thing. Neville looked out the window and nodded once, slowly, and something in his posture changed slightly, something settling. The train moved south through the winter countryside, and outside the sky was clearing from gray to a thin, pale blue, and Hermione returned to her book and Ron returned to his chess and they talked, the four of them, about things that were both important and completely unimportant, and the rhythm of it was easy and real in the way that things that are genuinely yours feel easy and real. Platform 9 3/4 was the controlled chaos of an ending, families arriving, trunks being managed, owls registering displeasure, the particular emotional texture of a place where a lot of separations and reunions were happening simultaneously. Harry stood on the platform with his trunk and Hedwig on his arm and watched it for a moment before looking for the portal. He found it already open. Strange had pulled it precisely enough that it appeared as simply a gap in the air beside a pillar, easily missed in the general movement of the platform, visible if you knew where to look. The amber geometry of it was familiar and home in a way that bypassed thought entirely, and through it Harry could see the sanctum's entrance hall, the afternoon light through the high windows, the specific arrangement of familiar things. Wanda was standing just inside the portal. She looked at him across the gap between the platform and the sanctum's hall, and the expression she had was the one she saved for things that she didn't want to perform anything around, just the feeling, unmediated, the way she'd looked at him when he was 2.5 and showing her red sparks between his fingers and the world was still very large. He stepped through. She pulled him into a hug before he'd fully arrived, which meant he arrived into it, the trunk landing beside him and Hedwig relocating to the nearest surface with the ruffled dignity of a bird who had not consented to this arrangement, and Harry let himself be held for a moment in the way he let himself be held by very few people, completely and without management. You're all right, Wanda said, into his hair. I'm all right, he confirmed. She held on for another moment. Then she released him and looked at him with the reading expression, the one that went all the way through. She found whatever she was looking for. Come eat, she said. Wong made something. Strange is pretending he helped. I did help, Strange said, from somewhere in the depths of the sanctum. He moved a pan once, Wanda told Harry. I moved it at a critical moment, Strange said. Harry laughed, and the laugh was uncomplicated and fully his, and he walked into the sanctum with his trunk over one shoulder and Hedwig relocating from her temporary perch to follow, and the building settled around him with the deep familiar recognition of a place that had been waiting and was now complete. Strange was in the kitchen, and the expression on his face when Harry walked in was the expression Harry had learned to read as Strange's equivalent of other people's open emotion, contained and precise and entirely unmistakable. He looked Harry over with the diagnostic attention he gave to things that had been in dangerous situations, found what he was looking for, and the tension in his shoulders released in the almost imperceptible way that people who held things very still release things. "Sit down," he said. "Tell me everything." Harry sat. "I will. But first," he looked at both of them. "I want to talk about my parents." The sentence landed in the kitchen and was held by both of them with the careful attention of people who had been waiting for this particular door and knew its weight. He'd had the photographs since Gringotts. He'd had his mother's research journals in his trunk since the fall. He'd been carrying the knowledge of Lily and James Potter since he was old enough to carry it, shaped by the love working in his magical core that was his mother's final gift and his constant companion. He knew them in all the ways you could know people who weren't present. But he hadn't asked. Not directly, not as a conversation. He'd been waiting until it felt like the right moment, and the right moment was the end of his first year at the school they had attended, in the kitchen of the home where he had grown up, with the people who had chosen him. "I want to know who they were," he said. "Not the legend. Not the story. What were they actually like?" Strange and Wanda looked at each other, and the look they exchanged was about what they had and what they didn't have, and the honesty of both, and they turned back to Harry and Wanda said, "We only met them once. At the end." "I know," Harry said. "But we can tell you what we saw," Strange said. "And everything we learned after. What the magical record said about your mother's work. What the people who knew them have said over years of, and the photograph," Wanda said. She reached into her pocket, Harry hadn't known she had it, she must have taken it from his trunk, and set on the table the photograph from Godric's Hollow, the one that had stopped moving on the night of October 31st, 1981, and had been still ever since. Lily Potter with laughing eyes. James Potter with impossible hair. Infant Harry mid-laugh, arms reaching for something out of frame. Harry looked at it for a long moment. He picked it up. The photograph moved. Not much, not the full animated magic of a working photograph, but a breath, a small settling, the image shifting slightly the way a person shifts when they exhale after holding something for a long time. Lily Potter's eyes found the camera. James Potter's hand moved slightly on her shoulder. The infant in the image laughed with a fullness and completeness that went all the way to his small toes. Harry stared at it. "It stopped in October 1981, he said. "It did," Wanda said, very quietly. "It wasn't damaged. The working in it didn't fail. It just stopped," Strange said. "We never understood why." Harry looked at the moving photograph, 3 people, alive and happy on a specific afternoon that was gone, the image restored to motion in his hands, and felt what lived in his scar, the love working, his mother's sacrifice, the most fundamental magic he carried, pulse once, warm and deep and present. She'd put the magic in the photograph. Not deliberately. Not as a separate working. She'd poured so much of herself into loving her family that it had saturated every object in that house, and when she died the magic went still, waiting for the thing it recognized, and the thing it recognized had taken 11 years to come back for it. "She's in my magic," Harry said. Not a statement about the supernatural. A statement about structure and fact. The love working. Everything she was in that moment, it fused with my core. "And the photograph, recognized the same source," Wanda said. "Yes. We thought it might, if you held it." Harry set the photograph on the table where all 3 of them could see it. Lily Potter laughing. James Potter laughing at Lily laughing. Small Harry completely and enormously delighted by everything. "Tell me about them," Harry said. And they did. Strange talked about what the magical records showed of Lily's research work, which had been genuinely ahead of its time, a theoretical framework for defensive magic that informed several subsequent developments in the field and that Strange had been quietly building on for years in his own work, attributing it correctly in the one paper he'd published in a journal that bridged the wizarding and sorceress traditions. His voice had the quality it had when he described work he found genuinely excellent, precise and warm in equal measure. Wanda talked about what she'd felt in the house, the quality of the love working, the kind of magic that only existed when a person was fully, completely without reservation themselves in a moment. She described Lily Potter's sacrifice not as a tragedy, though it was that, but as a choice made from absolute certainty, the most powerful kind of magical working because it required nothing from the practitioner except the willingness to be entirely what they were. She knew herself completely, Wanda said. You can feel it in the magic. She didn't hesitate. She wasn't afraid. She was certain. Harry listened to all of it, and added it to what he already knew, and the people in the photograph were not less gone for any of it and also, in some way that operated below the rational and was no less real for that, were not entirely absent. Outside, the December evening was settling over Greenwich Village, the streetlights coming on, the city going about its enormous and indifferent business. The sanctum's windows gathered the last of the afternoon light and held it the way old things held light, warmly and without hurry. She would have been fascinated by you, Strange said, at some point in the evening, and he said it in the tone he used for things he'd thought about carefully and decided to say. Your mother. The theoretical framework she was developing, it was moving toward exactly the kind of multi-system magical integration you represent. She was working toward the same idea from the other direction. As if she knew, Harry said. Or as if some part of her magic knew, Wanda said. The same way some part of the chaos energy knew where to go, that night. Harry thought about this, and about the mirror in the chamber that had read him and decided he deserved the stone, and about the photograph that had waited, and about the cloak that had followed him since September, and about the wand that had negotiated rather than chosen. What are the Deathly Hallows, he said. A silence. Not alarmed, strange silences were never alarmed, they were the silences of someone whose mind had just gone several moves ahead. This one had a quality that Harry recognized as the silence of a long-held question suddenly having the right context. Where did you hear that term? Strange said. The cloak, Harry said. I've been reading its structure since September. There's something in the weave that I couldn't classify, something that resonated with all three of my power systems in a way a family heirloom shouldn't. He looked at the cloak, which was draped over the chair beside him in its habitual position. It's not just old. It's something else. And there's a symbol, I've seen it in 3 separate places this year. On a grave in Godric's Hollow in a book Hermione was reading. On a ring in the Gringotts historical records. Referenced in a text on wand lore in the Hogwarts library. Strange looked at Wanda. Wanda looked at Harry with the expression she had when she was deciding between now and later, and decided now. The Deathly Hallows, she said, are 3 objects of extraordinary magical power. Together they are supposed to make their master undefeatable by death. She paused. We've known about them for years. We didn't tell you because we hadn't confirmed the 3rd one. The Resurrection Stone, Harry said. The Elder Wand. The Cloak of Invisibility. He looked at the cloak. That's my father's cloak. Yes, Strange said. And the Elder Wand, Harry said slowly, following the logic with the care it deserved, is the most powerful wand in existence. The first wand, in some traditions. If the chaos magic in me fused with a wizard's core, and if the hallow that death gave to the oldest Peveril brother was a wand designed to channel magical power without limit, stop, Strange said, and his voice had the quality it had during training sessions when Harry was approaching something that required full attention and full preparation and not just intuition running ahead of it. Not tonight. We finished tonight's conversation first. Harry looked at him. You know what it means. I have a hypothesis, Strange said. It requires confirmation before I'll say it out loud. Because once I say it out loud, we're committed to what it means, and what it means is, he paused. Significant. Tell me when you're ready, Harry said, and meant it, because Strange's sense of when something needed preparation was not caution for caution's sake but the discipline of someone who had learned what happened when you ran toward significant things without adequate footing. Soon, Strange said. This summer. Harry nodded. The fire burned in the kitchen, warm and ordinary, and the photograph of his parents moved quietly on the table, Lily laughing, James laughing, small Harry reaching, and the sanctum held the evening around them with the solid certainty of a place that had made its decision about who it belonged to and found the answer satisfactory. Wanda poured more tea. Strange returned to the food on the stove, whether or not his contribution to its preparation had been significant. Hedwig rearranged herself on her perch with the authority of a creature who had assessed the room and found it adequate. And Harry sat at the kitchen table of his home, in the body of his first year, at the edge of everything that was coming, the reconstituting dark, the approaching truths, the long work of a world that needed what he was, and felt, running through all of it, the clean foundational certainty of someone who knew exactly where they stood. Ready, he thought. Same as always. But differently ready, now. More himself than before. More complete. The Deathly Hallows, and Voldemort's return, and the long road of the prophecy, and the wizarding world learning to see him clearly, all of it out there, waiting, patient and inevitable. He picked up the photograph of his parents. They laughed, all three of them, in that sealed afternoon. He smiled back. Outside, the city continued its vast ordinary life, indifferent to magic and destiny and the boy at the kitchen table who was both older and younger than his years in the specific way of people who have been loved well and had the wisdom to know it. And in the walls of the Sanctum Sanctorum, the old magic settled around the life being lived inside it, and kept its watch, and held.